reading the news, but from what they tell me, they could get 20 years in jail, and they'll get it. I'll tell you, there's going to be no leniency, and there'll be no pardons. I can tell you that right now.
And you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they get, you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they'll go to one of these prisons in El Salvador. Do you think with the way that the judges have been issuing injunctions, it would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador than these MS-13 or Tren de Aragua guys?
Well, I view these people as terrorists just like others. When I looked at those showrooms burning and those cars, not one or two, like 7, 8, 10 burning, exploding all over the place. These are terrorists. You didn't have that on January 6th, I can tell you. You didn't have anything like that on January 6th, which is sort of amazing because on January 6th, the Democrats were talking. Nobody was killed other than a very beautiful young woman, Ashley.
It would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador than these MS-13 or Tren de Aragua guys?
Well, I view these people as terrorists just like others. When I looked at those showrooms burning and those cars, not one or two, like 7, 8, 10 burning, exploding all over the place.
Sana'a, capital of Yemen. This is what CENTCOM does best. Bombing civilian buildings in a residential neighborhood in Sana'a, Yemen. This is what happened last time. They bomb at night because they are cowards. 5 people were dead, 15 injured, but these are initial numbers. Could be much, much worse. This is a residential neighborhood. It's about 2.5 kilometers from the center of the action in Sana'a.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Monday, March 24th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. A lot to get to today. Basically, one general thing I want you thinking about as we go over it. I kind of gave you a little insight there, not just about the kind of the partisan conversation around this Tesla, the ongoing Tesla topic, but more so about what I think's underlying that from a nonpartisan perspective, as usual. But to consider how that may tie into larger conversations in kind of comparison to what real terrorism looks like ongoing around the world. We'll touch on that toward the end. But one of the main central things to keep in mind today, just from a like the point that I referenced from James Corbett's recent interview with I'm blanking on the podcast. I'd love to give him a shout out right now. It's what is something podcast. Damn it. I'll put him in the show note if I can. But anyway, in that recent interview of him saying that these are building blocks, right? From administration to administration, left and right, they basically hand off the baton. They build and they continue to build on what they're handed from it. And even though there's a lot of wedge issues and narratives and, apparent, at least what they want you to think is division amongst them or, difference of opinion. And the reality is you can see these ongoing agendas from administration to administration. So today, look through that, thinking of that kind of connection from how these things have continued to build. And you're going to see a lot of narrative, a lot of flashy, when you dig into it, you'll immediately recognize that this is not even remotely what they're claiming. All I want you to ask is what that might mean. Don't take my word for it. Just think about it. What would be the logic of why they would lie about what they're doing and doing something else? And then when you see that something else seems to be perfectly in line with multiple agendas across multiple administrations, then, at least consider whether that is a continuous narrative or rather agenda that never really stops. And the narrative continues to fluctuate based on what they think you'll buy. Always something to consider. I'll leave it there. Make sure to start out in general, I want to make sure if you guys find something you think is important in this conversation, I always say this at the end of the show, but if you're watching now, take time to break off what you like. I know these are long shows, and I know that minimizes our reach. I think it just is what it is today. And I try to do small things here and there, interviews, but I find it impossible not to include things that I think are important. So if you like a part of the conversation, make a note of it, clip it out, talk with your groups about it. Make sure you tag me. I'll share it myself. Give your group a boost. The point is just to help get the information out there. Just critical thinking, nonpartisan, objective conversation. Now, I want to start with what we're going to do today is basically talk about some developments of things that are, not necessarily failed promises, but just the ongoing partisan, all government manipulation and then both narratives and the real direction. And one of the things we're seeing now is this kind of spending conversation. And I told you I'd continue to follow up on this. I find it incredibly fascinating. I can sit on that USA spending website for a very long time and looking at these different projects and different things they're funding. I'm going to go over four main topics to start in regard to spending that you might find surprising. Specifically searching for circumcision, you might find interesting, seeing as how they can't stop referencing this Mozambique circumcision point, which is crazy that's even being spent. That anything is from this government or your money is being spent on that, but you might be surprised or might not be surprised to find out that they're still doing that. Different funding, different contract for the same outcome. We'll also talk about COVID-19 spending that's continuing, mRNA spending that's continuing. Weirdly enough, as I keep showing you, more contracts for climate change spending from this administration. Now, you may think that doesn't make any sense until you stand back and look at it from a nonpartisan continuation of the same agenda. And I'll explain why they might even still be using those terminology or those terms, the terminology in regard to why, knowing that we're going to look there. It's the same point they make about USAID and why the woke ideology was being used as a vehicle for regime change. It's the thing of the time. Now it's shifting away from something else. But historically, it's whatever they can do to get the foot in the door. And yes, there are people that believe in those things, but we're going to go through why this spending is continuing, why that's important, and eventually, and make sure we touch on how that rolls into the larger kind of globalist agenda that is still continuing, and then how this Tesla conversation seems to fit into it all. And the main point on that one focal point is that the Tesla cars are absolutely clearly spying on you, like a lot of them are. And this weird shift to all of a sudden Republicans are super all about EV, electric vehicles, but only the right ones, pun intended. Of course, we'll go into the digital ID overlap to that and some overlapping foreign policy that I think is very important. But we'll start today with one point that I can include this in a lot of different places today. This one, I just wanted to point this out because in this, I think we've mentioned this already. In fact, that's weird. Did I not straighten this? Hold on. Just for those in the podcast, if there's any space on the side of the window for me, it drives me crazy because that's how crazy I am. There we go. Had to fix that. All right. So this is important because, and I believe we've touched on it, but if we haven't, it's not really about, there are interesting points in here for this executive order from Donald Trump, which is on the screen from March 14th, about the different executive orders that Biden had put out that he just made null and void. There's interesting points to look into it, especially since, this says ensuring a data-driven response to COVID-19. Well, you may think, see, he stopped it because he's against it. Well, when I go through the many different contracts, basically funding the same things, you might ask why that makes sense. But more than all of the different things, some good, some bad, the point is, I rescinded 78 presidential orders and memoranda issued by President Biden. So just recognize this is the larger point that Catherine Austin Fitts, I think, was one of the earliest people to make the point. That if you do this the wrong way, even in the interest of things you actually want, it will guarantee that that at some point it'll be changed. So if you can recognize right now that he can simply on the one stroke of a pen say 78 different executive orders from Biden that changed all sorts of things are no longer valid, what do you think is going to happen the next time somebody else who disagrees with what he's doing takes power? So for all those out there acting like we're going to change the world with all these, this is only a momentary measure. And in most cases, executive orders don't technically legally apply to anything in all cases, other than the executive branch, which is actually a pretty big web. But at the end of the day, you already have examples of things that are not actually in the wheelhouse of what these would apply to. And yet they're doing it anyway. It's just a lot of what's happening right now is lawless, and it's not just the right of this conversation. It is your U.S. government. How long have we been talking about rampant lawlessness? Well before even Trump's first administration, because that's the reality. So just think about how silly it is to act like this is changing when we know it's as simple as that. I think it's designed that way. I think it's meant to give you the illusion of change when really the goal is to cement the same thing even harder. Now, to get into some spending points, I just want to make this very clear. And I want to do this early in the show because this is just a really quick, rapid succession of just straight up blatant hypocrisy. there's always some narrative about how some secret holdover, and if you're gonna, it's certainly possible, right, that there's a holdover from the Democrats or some secret guy fighting Trump or a deep state, that's always possible, whatever those things mean to you. But as we go through 5 different categories of multiple different examples of spending, it kind of becomes hard to make it about one's holdover unless there's one in every category, in every position, in every group, which then becomes just his administration. So you can decide how you want to foresee this. Recognize these things are still happening. So this one, I could go through each one of these. There's like 4 that they just kind of keep saying over and over, one of which is circumcision in Mozambique. And we keep hearing it because it sounds crazy, because it is crazy. Now, when you understand, and this is not in any way, well, I should say, first of all, that all of these categories, I'm not highlighting this as good or bad, even though I definitely, at some points, I will jump in and tell you my opinion. But overall, it's not about whether these are good or bad for this point today. It's about the fact that we have been told these things have been stopped, that this is why we have to fight the USAID plan, which I agree USAID is a problem, even though they're not doing that. They're continuing it on the State Department. But they're saying this is why. Look at all the dumb things they were spending. Okay, then if you think that, then stand back and explain to me why they're continuing to fund those things and why that makes sense. I just want to trigger this critical thought for people. So one of the main things you hear are things like that. Mozambique, circumcision. Now, what's interesting before we go over just this one category, and don't take this as me saying this should be done, I want to make a very clear line here that I think, like a lot of people in this country right now think, even some that want foreign spending for help, for whatever they believe they're going to help people around the world, that right now, most people in this country are saying, how about we just stop all of it until we figure out what's going on? No spending of any country, of any kind, whether Israel or China, anybody. Nothing should leave this country until we know that Americans' needs are met and that this is something that we all agree on. That's what a lot of people feel, and mostly Republicans, it seems. And that's why they thought they would end the wars, and Israel kept being funded, and so did Ukraine, which, by the way, still seems to be continuing despite all the claims that it was already over. But Mozambique circumcision is interesting because the main point, you can just look at one of these many different PolitiFact checks or whatever. This is not to say that I agree this should be done, but the point they make in this, just the one I want to highlight, is that circumcision is whether you fund it or not, is done in this context because it apparently is one of the best examples of, efforts that can be taken to prevent the spread of HIV. Now, that's not to say good or bad, or I agree with it or don't. The point is that that's the logic behind why that was done, even if that's not what they were doing, even if it was some CIA cover for some regime change, which usually is. The point is to understand why that's being done. Okay. So when they go Mozambique circumcision, again, none of us should be okay with that being spent on from our tax dollars. I want you to recognize that just searching for circumcision under the dates from when they've been in power since the moment they took over in this administration, you can see a lot. All of these 11 different things are funding something that mentions circumcision. I'm only going to show you 4, 2 of which specifically relate to Mozambique. So here is one that says the Department of Health and Human Services. This is most of them. The trustees of Columbia and University in the city of New York. The simple point. There's a long thing you can read here. It goes over a lot of health stuff. The main point, increased coverage of HIV prevention services, including voluntary medical male circumcision. Okay. So if we're going to be logically consistent here, we might want to ask why Donald Trump's administration, specifically this month, has spent $14 million to fund, in part, circumcision. And this is specifically in, where was the location? I mean, honestly, the location should be irrelevant, but I believe it was somewhere, in Tanzania. So it's kind of irrelevant, Mozambique, Tanzania. And so if you read it, the whole thing, well, it's about HIV prevention. Now, my stance, and most in this country, is that why are we funding that? Especially right now, whether we want to in the future or not, why are we doing that now when we have a lot of things to worry about? And we're all this conversation, rightly so, about frivolous spending and Democrat secret stuff. Okay, so if we're recognizing that they are still funding the exact same thing to the tune of $14 million in this one contract, when, by the way, there's $100 million in total funding that they're going to continue to potentially dole out because this contract is active as of right here. You can see continually. I mean, this is the 6th of March is when they funded this. $14 million, sustain and accelerate the comprehensive response in the Republic of Tanzania. This alone should cause outrage to Republicans who believed that they were stopping things like Mozambique circumcision. No, they used that ridiculous thing, so is this, to get you to think that's all it was and we're winning because we stopped all those things, even though they're still funding it. That seems wild to me. Here's another one. This one is right to care, also HHS. It is for $15 million, $652,000. And this is one day before that one. This is on March 5th of this year. Provision of voluntary medical male circumcision for HIV prevention in the Republic of South Africa. So is it only Mozambique that we're upset with, or is it the fact that we're funding circumcision for whatever reason in other countries? And if you are upset about that, then you should be upset that Donald Trump's administration is still literally doing that right now. Hasn't stopped, and they funded some since they've taken over. That's $30 million so far just in these last two contracts. Don't forget again that there's a whole bunch of them. Plenty more. This is just under grants. You can look under, oh, actually, this one only has grants. But I mean, this first one is for $106 million. How about the next one? This one is from also HHS. They've spent $7.1 million. This was on March 17th. This is for HIV prevention, voluntary medical male circumcision, gender-based violence prevention. Now, again, don't take, the funny thing is I'm not, in some of these I'll like point out like diversity stuff. It's not that I'm even saying good or bad. I, again, don't think any of it should be funded, but I'm just simply pointing out that this is what Republicans would likely be unhappy about. And of course, would likely frame as a Democrat thing if it wasn't being done explicitly under Trump's administration right now in multiple ways. And let's also not forget that Health and Human Services is RFK Jr. right now. All these are continuing. Okay, here is, like, I'm willing to bet you that you're going to get somebody on the right, if this becomes a story, which it likely won't, because that's not how the world works today, would make an argument for why this is important, because we have to keep them from getting HIV, because that's only going to spread and be a problem. Look, you could make an argument. There's a logical argument for why circumcision isn't important. Why are we funding it? Isn't that the argument they all just got done making? Why should we have to fund those things? Let's have some logical consistency today. So these are important clips to put out. Might make these myself tomorrow. Okay, let's talk about one that is simply AIDS. Just look for AIDS, and I could have done HIV as well, which is probably more results. But you can see there's 235 contracts. And let's recognize this is only from January 20th until today. 235 contracts, 60 different contracts IDV. There's 85 grants. Now I look at grants because that's what you're going to get typically, the USAID stuff, the kind of things that we're most on guard about, but make sure you look at all of these. All of these will be included for you. Okay, so this one is from HHS as well. And it is for $2.5 million, funded just the beginning of March, strengthening epidemiology and strategic information in the Republic of Zimbabwe under the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief. Okay, why are we funding that? Why is it happening? It's still happening, guys. It's continuing through Trump's administration. They're funding brand new projects. Some of these started in 2025. This one, it looks like it closed on me here. This one was, I think this was just about so this is USAID. I want to show you that this is continuing through Rubio's State Department run, which is really how it always was, honestly, at USAID. And I want to show you that, and see that most of these are, I didn't include because people, it's less impactful, I argue. But I just want to point out that on the 30th so 10 days after they took over, they continued the contract. Community-based violence prevention and linkages to response in South Africa. So I just want to point out, why is it our responsibility to fund community-based violence prevention in South Africa? Maybe there's more going on there. Aren't we talking about South Africa a lot right now? Maybe we should consider that they're still running USAID, CIA regime change tactics in a place that they're very politically interested in. Just a thought. Okay, here is one from HHS, AIDS Control Program, another one that is just simply continuing. This one has been continued. So remember I was talking, when we talked about this last time. The action type means that they've revised it and continued the program. So the program is currently ongoing. The last funding was I think back in 2024, but still the point is they've not just ignored it, they have continued the program. And you can see this one is for Uganda Ministry of Health and to execute its core mandate for a harmonized and sustainable health sector response to HIV and AIDS. I could have put that in the other category, right? But the point is USAID. Oh, this was HHS. The other one was. The point is just continuing these same programs. Now, those are minor because they haven't funded it more. Maybe tomorrow they'll cancel it. That's also possible. This one continued to be funded. This is from HHS. It is for access to community HIV testing, services, and treatment. Okay, they gave them $790,000 on March 5th for HIV treatment in, where was it? Malawi. Okay. That's just under the HIV. Now, again, recognize you can search all of these. There are I mean, look at this. The contracts ultimately is 185 results. All of those reference funding overseas for some kind of grant for HIV. Okay, this one is just for COVID. I thought that was interesting to search for. So I've been doing this kind of periodically, but looks like there's a lot that's recently happened. So COVID-19, right? I mean, now this shouldn't be that much of a stretch for people because of Donald Trump's mRNA program he's rolling out. Clearly, he still supports the COVID shot, despite this weird kind of cognitive dissonance in the entire movement behind him, acting like he's somehow not really meaning that, I guess. It's strange. But here, there's all these contracts. Again, you can include for yourself. Here, just wanted to include this again because I wanted to follow up on this still, which is the Moderna contract from the original contract, which has still not ended. I found this interesting because realistically, that was supposed to end, or I guess it's going to end in April 2025. But if the whole point was this is something we're fighting, just recognize that as of February 13th, they have continued a supplemental agreement for work within scope. They've continued the group to work with Moderna. Now, this is a smaller one because I think we all know that, being honest with themselves, want to include that. This is one you should keep track of. If they keep funding it beyond April 15th, I think that's relevant. Here's one from Department of Treasury. Managed Infrastructure Data Services, COVID-19. This is for $5,100,000, February 18th. And it's simply about, I personally, if you could read more into it for yourself, is the data structure around this. Remember, they're using all the data from what they gathered for their program with Larry Ellison and Oracle and SoftBank. And I'll point out the Stargate program again. I think this is important because it's the information data side of COVID-19, which does not seem to be ending. They gave them $5 million more, right? Goes till 2030. Interesting timing. Okay, here's one for Moderna also. Or rather, Modex Therapeutics, excuse me. And this is HHS. Advance the development of potent cross-reactive, multi-specific antibodies for the PrEP countermeasures of COVID-19 and seasonal and highly pathogenic avian influenza. Well, we know they're working on that, guys, because they've already made one for animals. They've already continued to fund a Moderna shot that Biden put forward for avian flu, an mRNA version. That's all happening still. It's amazing what people can ignore. Potential amount up to $205 billion. Make sure, excuse me, read that wrong. It's $205 million. But the point is, more coming. And as of right now, as of March, they've simply continued the program. Right? So that means that is continuing. That's what that means. Now, here's one that's more important, I find. This one is for the Department of Transportation. And it's specifically the continuation of this. Section 5307, American Rescue Plan, total funding for this grant is amended with the addition of the MTC Phase 2 fund allocation and now totals, if you can read that properly, there's no commas, $536 million. Now, what I find fascinating about this is that you can scroll down here and you'll find overlaps. It says zero amount, but it says continuation. And if you read into it, it actually argues that they're giving them more money, but in a different phase. I think there's a lot of manipulation going on to make it appear as if things might not be happening when they are, and so on. Read into it for how you will. This is just something for you to look into. The amendment adds a project to this grant for the MTC Phase 2, the ARP funding, and adds the second allocation of the $248 million. This application utilizes ACT funding to prevent, prepare, and to respond to the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. So why would we still need that? The funds will only be used to prevent, prepare, and to respond to coronavirus-related activities. Now we see why. Because it's a broad scope of just whatever falls under that category. So I want you to recognize some of those were funding. And here, you can look into, I was just looking on grants. Oh, I didn't reload for you. The link's in there. There's a lot more in there. Some funded still, some continued. But the mRNA, the COVID-19 specific is continuing. Let's just look up. Oh, actually, I did mRNA last. We'll come back to mRNA because that relates to some other medical things. But I searched for climate change. Now, this one you might find especially interesting because maybe even the HIV thing, you could make some kind of broken argument, even though it contradicts what they just said for why he might do that. Explain for me why the Trump administration will be funding things in the context of climate change. The only way you could make sense of this is if you want to pretend somebody else did all of these without his knowledge, all recently, or that they're supporting these for some other reason that contradicts what they were telling you. I want to say before we even look at these, my point is not that I think that they're all secretly believing in climate change. I think that's a ploy. I think, and whether some uninformed congressional people, which is what I see most of them as, actually believe they know everything when their strings are being pulled by all sorts of things. The reality is they're just means to an end. some people buy into this stuff, but realize just like the woke ideology for USAID that was used like a lot of other narratives going back decades to execute whatever they want to accomplish, same as this. Now you have to realize that right now, looking overseas, I think even some of these might be USAID. No, I guess not. That was the earlier ones. The point, nonetheless, is that when you're doing stuff like this, there's usually an agenda involved. Now, maybe there's places around the world where that excuse is still what's necessary. I mean, you just got the point is we don't know. What we do know is that this is still happening. Now, this one's even more interesting because they actually started funding this on February 3rd, 2025. So this was not some carryover from the Biden administration. And this is from the EPA. It reads, environmental indicators and pollution modeling to support climate change impact assessment. Now, again, I'm not trying to say good or bad. I mean, I would even argue in some context, not in the idea of the politicized climate change concept, but just the idea of monitoring the changes in our environment might be necessary. And so don't take this as good or bad. It's about hypocrisy. This is not supposed to be what we're told is happening if you believe the narratives. So there you go. This is 11 days after they took over, $397,000 for climate change research. I find that interesting, just specifically for hypocrisy. This one's from NASA. Landslide climate change experiment. This one is for $200,000 on the 26th, 6 days after they took over. This one is from Department of Commerce. They funded this a lot. Now, this is mostly in this month. So there was a $1.5 million spent in February 18th. Then from the 6th of March to the 12th of March, it looks like, over almost $3 million. No, maybe like 2.5. So altogether, a lot of money, millions of dollars, just since they've taken over. The Cooperative Institute will employ world-class researchers to conduct science in service to society and in partnership with NOAA, which is a very, what does it stand for again? It's in here somewhere. I'll just look it up real quick if I can't remember what it's. It's something that's very much related to the climate change conversation. I was just reading about them right there. The Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory, but I think it stands for something else. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Very much in line with the climate change agenda. Now it says, the Cooperative Institute will be supported by a robust infrastructure committed to equity, education, and outreach, climate science, and prediction. Not good or bad, just simply something you wouldn't believe Donald Trump's administration would spend $3 million on. Unless you understand that we're being lied to about the wedge issue back and forth. And it's about something else entirely. This is from the NSF. And this is interesting. It says NEON operations and maintenance. So I wanted to find out what that was in particular. And the National Ecological Observatory Network, or NEON, is a facility program that gathers and provides long-term standardized data on ecological responses to changes in land and use and climate across the United States. It is immersed in the climate change conversation. NEON's data and observations focus on how land use, climate change, and invasive species affect biodiversity, disease ecology. Okay. Whether you support it or not, the point is that's something that seems to be against what Trump seems to claim he supports. National Ecological Observatory Network, or NEON, it provides key data to enable scientists to understand and predict the changes and enable policymakers to potentially lessen detrimental effects, pursuing advanced ecological and climate research. That one's for $18 million. Now, let's just even say you agree with some of these things. Don't you think that money could be better used to help what a lot of people understand Americans need right now? And what about all the places you guys reached? What about North Carolina? What about Conyers, Georgia? What about all these different places we've talked about that the Democrats were ignoring, and then we just skip over that when it comes time for Trump to have power? This one is from EPA. Communities will have enhanced resilience to climate change and sea level rise. Address climate resiliency is one of the many parts of what they're focusing on in this contract, and that's for $5.7 million. That was on the 4th of February. This one is from the National Science Foundation. And it says, address a broad range of important scientific questions, including significant insights into the impacts of global ocean climate change in the next decade. Right. So understand, I myself included, very much, and I think it's absolutely factually proven that the climate change narrative is a massive psychological manipulation. Not to say that we're not very obviously destroying this planet in 100 different ways. Mostly the people that want to point to that like they want to change something by stopping you from driving your car. The reality is that it is a manipulation from the core point of the carbon discussion. Not going to dive into it all today. I've gone through it in many different points. I highly recommend James Corbett and plenty of others. The point is, this is them funding things in the direction of stopping what we all argue is, at least what a lot of, I think largely Republicans argue, is a complete scam. How do you explain that? Okay, this one is for but two funding, this weirdly both on the same day, the 10th of March of this year, $2.7 million and another $2.3 million to fight climate change from Trump's administration. Seems weird, doesn't it? Well, here's one overlap I find that maybe might be relevant. This is from Wired, March 22nd. A mysterious startup is developing a new form of solar geoengineering, to fight climate change. Guess what? It's called Stardust, an Israeli-U.S. startup. What a surprise. Intends to patent its unique aerosol technology for temporarily cooling the planet. Well, gee, there's a lot of other things we've talked about in the context of aerosol technology or the idea of Israeli-U.S. startups and what they might want to accomplish in that ecosphere. Or as we get to something more interesting over the idea of a golden dome that Trump brought up, we'll get to that later in the show. You'll find it very interesting. What he's referencing is the Iron Dome, but wants a U.S. version of it, which if you know deeper, that's another whole rabbit hole. But how the funding goes and how Israel's always abused that, this is just more funding manipulation for Israel. I promise that's how it'll work out. But what they need to argue that it needs to be done for the whole country, which is what Trump's really stressing, despite the billions and billions of dollars that they can't even factor in, surveillance. Satellites, sensors, surveillance in literally every place in this country. Yeah, but maybe just to keep you safe, from all the different rockets that are always flying in this country, but also something else. So think about that when you have an Israeli startup that's very much interconnected with the Israeli intelligence. That's not even debatable, guys. I'll include these articles. A couple of the ones that reference that very topic. Just so you guys, if you want to look further into this, there's a lot of very obvious discussion about how Israel is, openly, by the way, like legitimately infiltrating different dynamics and publicly discussing it. The Prince and the Spy, Whitney wrote in 2023 for TLAV, original content for TLAV. She has also posted on an Element Hangout because, it's fine by me. The point is that this is a very important article. And one of the main points is not just how Eric Prince is literally working for the Israeli spy apparatus while trying to hawk a really fake megaphone at you that is basically compromised by Israel. And that's even Wired pointed that out. The point in this is about how it's obvious that the Israeli intelligence, according to their own discussions, these startups are basically an extension of their apparatus. I was trying to quickly find it in here, but the point is simply that it says right here, the stunning revelation that many Israeli companies, including Black Cube, have been founded as fronts for Israeli intelligence. And they openly state that, as well as the larger conversation about the infiltration of Israel, of the whole country discussion. But in light of the pager attacks, very important to think about, seeing as how it's not just spying, it's military action against whoever seems to be around, mostly women and children when that happened, or just the general Israeli global cybersecurity infiltration. So think about how crazy that is with what they're discussing. They need, and this is a U.S.-Israeli startup in regard to like your atmospheric control, and they're also doing it simultaneously some kind of, I'll actually include this one too, by the way. I keep forgetting about how much this connects. It's so incredible. This is another article from Derek Bros about the satellite. And this will be relevant. I'll include all these and remember this, we get to the next one. The title was, "You Can't Hide. Elon Musk and SpaceX are helping U.S. intelligence build the world's largest spy satellite network." So obviously these things are completely overlapped with Israeli intelligence. This is not a secret. Read it for yourself. National Reconnaissance Office is the deep state if you want to make any case for what that might be. And the point is, he says, now you can't hide. You're constantly being looked at. And he makes a clear case how Elon Musk, because he's helping with SpaceX, but also helping us build out the AI, because that's how this is going to work. So overlap that with a Israeli startup for a aerosol technology to, I guess, fight climate change, what that's even really is about, and how that is involved with the spying and everything else. So keep all that in mind. Now, remember where we just came from, though. The point being, why in the world is Donald Trump's administration spending anything on climate change? Daniel Prince pointed this out, and Efrat Fangason posted some other connective points that it's worth reading about the Israeli startup in regard to climate change. Now, just mRNA, I also think is relevant, because this is very clearly, that's not even a secret, something that they're, driving forward more than ever. And there's 250 grants just since they've taken over for mRNA. It's also 7 contracts. Now, this one is for HHS. Very quickly go through these. The point, where was it? Oh, it looks like the highlighting wasn't on there. That's weird. But it's right here. So it is for $635,000 since they've taken over. That's February 20th. And it's about mechanisms of mRNA localization and translational control, specifically in a certain point. But what this is all about, in my opinion, is research around how this is affecting your body, which, by the way, was exactly what happened during the rollout. Now they're testing all these different things and how mRNA, because clearly it either didn't work or that was just one stepping stone in their experimentation. HHS, here's another one. This is for $725,000 since February 14th. Biochemistry of pre-mRNA splicing. The central goal of this project is to understand fundamental mechanisms of human pre-mRNA splicing. Yeah, that sure sounds fun. Pharmacological techniques, in addition to obtaining new insights. The point is they're using in one case, vaccines. In addition to obtaining new insights into basic mechanisms of gene expression, these studies will improve the understanding of numerous mutations associated with various genetic diseases, or, whatever their shots cause that they blame on genetic diseases, as well as facilitate correct genetic diagnoses and therapeutic development for such diseases. So mRNA research for mRNA products. This is being done by HHS. That's RFK Jr. Let's be clear. This, by the way, this is going all the way until 2027. Apparently, this started in 1998. So this is a long-term funding direction. And let's act like this was some big thing they discovered. And just all of a sudden, this is the direction. Though, like we said to start, it's about long-term building blocks. The rest is noise, guys. Pay attention to what the outcomes have been consistently. Right now, it seems pretty obvious they're continuing this program. Now, this is also HHS, also RFK Jr. Now, this is really interesting to me. This one goes until 2026, working with the University of California, and it says natural killer cell engineering to target the HIV reservoir. HIV continues to be a global health concern. Do you agree with that? That has claimed the lives of millions. It says the goal of this research project is to develop new methods to enhance the intrinsic killing activity of these what they're called natural killer cells, or NK cells, and to develop natural killer cell-based kick and kill strategies to reduce the need for lifelong art by decreasing or eliminating latent viral reservoirs. Now, the framing this as going after these cells into your body that are these latent reservoirs of HIV. But as we know, as we should, these things are very much applicable to enhancing the natural killer cells. I argue could be a dual-use product. It says engineer natural killer cells to enhance their elimination of HIV-infected cells using an innovative non-viral mRNA transfection technology. Great. So mRNA-based natural killer cells to go after what they aim them at. Now, I mean, I'm not an expert on you tell me what you think about this. I think my point is simply mRNA direction. And this one is for about $750,000. Both funded on February 13th, 2025. This one is for HHS as well. Specifically, it says, we will study the fundamentals of SARS-CoV-2. There's plenty of people I think a lot on his side of the conversation doesn't even believe that's real. Specifically, the development in the lungs of the ACE2 in transgenic mice. So apparently we're still doing gain-of-function research, let's be clear, I think we all know that never stopped. We will examine if lung TRM cells contribute to the protection afforded by mRNA vaccines to better understand the role, if any, of memory T cells in mediating protection to SARS-CoV-2 and notable variants of concern. This is right back into the meat of that lie, of that entire COVID-19 deception. We extend and complement our studies in mice to Dr. Farber's Human Donor Repository to assess human memory formation following SARS-CoV-2 infection and vaccination. Yeah, nothing can go wrong there, I'm sure. This is for $863,000 as of February 24th of this year. Now, you tell me if you think those things matter. I quite frankly think all of that shows you shocking levels of hypocrisy. But as usual, guys, this stuff won't get pointed to, won't get highlighted other than our circles. And this is the way this works. But get it in front of people that need to see it. Where this is not about trying to have some kind of viral sensation. This is about trying to save people's lives and show people who are fighting against or wrongly believing the power structures on their side to show them what's really going on so we can make accurate, informed decisions. right? I mean, whether you believe, which I don't, that your vote translates, an informed electorate, or rather just an informed population, is the most important thing that we can have, like in the context of real change, in my opinion. But as Camus highlights, and just to highlight back to the mRNA direction, and really just to show you this again, that Trump is quite literally, as you do, if hopefully you know, if you don't, you'll probably be shocked, is rolling out an mRNA cancer platform that will evolve into just a platform for mRNA shots for literally everything. Now, that's not what they've stated, but they have stated it will evolve into other shots. But remember, the core point of the mRNA platform, which is what this is to evolve into literally everything. They've made this case so many times over the years. This is Trump partners with technocrats to promote mRNA injections, artificial intelligence, and transhumanism. Stargate. Now, in mind that they're making mRNA shots, here's Camus pointing out something that, well, Camus included, myself included, a lot of us were screaming about right in the middle of the COVID-19 lie, which Trump still supports the shot, by the way. According to the Ohio-based academic medical center, large numbers of the COVID vaccinated, quote, may need heart transplants to avoid a sudden cardiac arrest. Man, where have you heard that before? You know, all those times we were being screamed down from pointing out the sudden collapsing athletes point. You know, they got hijacked by bombastic morons out there that made fake documentaries about all riddled with falsehoods around a true story in order to hide the bigger topic. The reality is this was obvious and provable in 2021. I mean, I bet you I could just search for one of them and it'll pop up. Oh, here, that's actually perfect. It's the search for collapsing athletes on the website. Look it up for yourself and recognize that most of this coverage for us was 2021. Collapsing athletes and the claims of Pfizer being that's November 2021. Collapsing athletes, 2021. Children athletes are collapsing and dying from sudden cardiac arrest at unprecedented levels, November 2021. Proven, guys. Literally. I'm not talking like that we knew every one of them was that, but literally by every measure, every peer-reviewed study, one was from FIFA, one was just childhood sports, showing you the amount of people collapsing that we could even prove, and we knew it was more than that, was shockingly higher than any year before it in any context. Now, in an honest ecosystem of information, that would have been wildly viral because it's a huge story, and it got shut down. And there was plenty of us talking about this. So on that point, recognize that that's what this is, just more science backing this up now. It says, however, the pro-vaccine nonprofit has yet to issue the red alert to the public about the looming catastrophic death wave. You know what that reminds me of? Like Red Cross refusing to acknowledge that it's provable that the spike protein or whatever we're discussing does translate into the blood and stay in the blood for 6 months or a lot longer than that. And they have refused to acknowledge that to this very day, even though they continue to give that blood out. You know, that's not an accident, guy. That's willful dishonesty. That is, I mean, you could call that's a crime. I mean, that's not even you call. That is a crime. They should go to jail for what they're doing. But there's more coordination than we realize. So continuing, it says, instead, Cleveland Clinic quietly dropped the bombshell in a recent update on its website. You know, just buried it somewhere so they can argue that they weren't liable for not pointing it out. According to the Cleveland Clinic, mass mortality is expected to surge due to a ticking time bomb of myocarditis among the COVID vaccinated. Bombshell. And don't, guys, wait. I'm sure you can expect some sort of the We Are the Media Now ecosystem of Elon Musk putting out a limited version of this in very Democrat siloed discussions when it's necessary. That's how this new limited hangout drip system works. But recognize you already know this, and it's not just one side, and the current president absolutely supports it. So does Biden. Myocarditis is inflammation of the heart muscle or myocardium. The inflammation weakens your heart muscle. You know all this. The point is that this is very real, and he does include the link to the article, which does include the link to the study. Now, WikiLeaks, as you guys will know well from this show, the review paper is groundbreaking because it summarizes all the ways the spike protein interferes with DNA damage and repair, i.e. is, how do they say that, oncogenic? I would argue, I think that's cancer causing, or let's look it up. Causing development of a tumor or cancers. But we weren't allowed to know that when the genetic vaccines, which make your own cells produce spike proteins for months. And I think it's much longer than that. The most studies I've seen say 6 months or longer because the study ends in 6 months and it continues to make them. But it says we rolled out because that would induce unnecessary fear and anxiety, basically saying that would have scared you. That shows you that all they wanted was you to take it regardless of the risks. It says, so instead, NIH recruited Eric Fried to have the first and most important paper retracted. Okay, so you know all this if you're watching this show or if you follow WikiLeaks because it's important. What you should recognize is that even to this very moment, they're not telling you that. And they're still promoting a shot, even more so one for cancer. That's the Stargate program. That should be insulting, disgusting, and chilling all at the same time, especially since you argue that this person's saving you from all these big bad things. Well, this is interesting, by the way. I saw this right before I went live. Oh, it's weird. Didn't tweet that or gab that, whatever you call it, on Gab. This is Peter Bovat sharing Dr. Jane Ruby's tweet. And I did look it up, and this is right before I went live, so I'm not going to go any deeper on it, but this is interesting. Trump will nominate acting CDC director Susan Monarez. Okay, so a Biden holdover. Maybe that's so they can blame everything on her in 6 months when they continue to go in the same direction. That's probably how this works. But the point is, she is being put in that position. And as Jane Ruby points out, Trump appoints baby killer as new CDC director. The point is about the COVID shots. And here's a tweet saying, the updated COVID shot is here. CDC recommends everyone 6 months or older get the shot. Yeah, we know how that worked out, guys. They're killing children. But they all still support it. And now Trump has literally put another person in place who is part of the problem. Like the guy that's hawking seed oils at you. You know, it's all fighting for Maha. Is that what we're pretending this is still? Well, I'll include this for you. One last thing on the health side of this that I think is important, and there's so many things falling at the side here. We've talked about PFAS for quite a long time. Actually, I should grab this one too, since this is crazy that this is still there. How long we talked about? I mean, really, I think we've talked about it well before East Palestine. But during that, it became another big topic because they recognized there was a huge release of PFAS and all that was part of the problem, but largely dioxins. But before that, we've talked about this. The forever chemicals conversation that basically people knew about, but the main conversation, mainstream and the government left and right wanted to pretend like it wasn't there. Well, this is after we were all talking about this. This is from March 2023. It says exposure to PFAS or forever chemicals, quote, can reduce women's fertility by 40%. 40. That's insane. And then we just went back to our lives. Who cares, right? I mean, in fact, don't forget, Biden's administration pushed the idea that they couldn't stop these because, national security, the military. That's what they argued. So if you want another alignment to show you that both these sides are the exact same damn thing when it comes to what matters, Trump halting the EPA limits on PFAS in drinking water. A tragic setback, Long Island environmentalist says. Now, you'll find some broken argument from the team sports side to make this some kind of a woke, climate change. It's very real and obvious and has nothing to do with either of those things. It has to do with your government, all sides of it, continuing to poison you or not caring what they do. So when you remove this, you're creating an opening for them to make it even worse without concern. That's the conversation about removing regulation. That's how they frame it. It's not for you. It's not making your life better. It's not stopping government control of your life. It's removing regulation from big companies that make money at your expense. Freedom. We're winning, right? President Trump has withdrawn a Biden administration plan. It wasn't happening, to be clear. I do not believe for a second that Biden was, in fact, even going to do anything about it. Set new limits on chemical discharge in drinking water. Why would you stop something like that? He says state regulators around the U.S. have been waiting for the EPA to take the lead, which they never will. These people, I don't believe for a second, actually care about you, because they've lied about every one of these last conversations we've had, whether it's Conyers, whether it's East Palestine. Scott C. Smith calls them out. They're lying to you guys. They know they're at some level. Somebody at this position knows they're lying. They've known about dioxins for decades. They don't want to tell you about it. I had this highlight. I guess I didn't make the screenshot of it, but the point was simple, that this is, Lee Zeldin, remember, the whole gold bars from the Titanic that Alex Jones wanted you to believe were actually gold bars somehow from the Titanic, even though it makes no sense. The point is that they're very clearly telling you during his hearing that it was a priority. Now, maybe he believes that, but Trump doesn't care. Either, or however you look at it, the point is it's not going to happen, at least so far. Maybe they'll go back tomorrow. But this is insane to me because of how obviously dangerous this is. And this is nothing but the interest of military and corporations. Now, discussing the larger conversation of how a lot of this leads into one, from a global perspective to whatever you want to call it. Whether we're talking about globalism, imperialism, technocracy, Zionism, they're all intertwined with this same agenda. And this is the show we did on January 8th. As Israel's globalist ambitions become clear, Team Sport Republicans endorse North American Union. That was the whole point about the very clear long-term New World Order plan or the Sustainable Development Goals, or whatever map you want to look at, that shows you one continent for all of Mexico, Greenland, the United States, all of it. And that's right now what they're still working towards. It hasn't gone away, which I find incredible. We'll come back to that as well. Or that right here. No, that's coming up here somewhere along the line. I forget where I put that today. But the point is simply that we're talking about the idea of Panama, of all these different examples. We were all told, you're all being trolled. I can't believe you fell for that. And as they continue to happen. Here, first, is the interesting overlap of this whole Commonwealth point that we talked about already, right? The reason I find this so interesting is because it's a continuation of the same expansionist globalist idea, showing you that they're all really interconnected and they're all just, that's what I see anyway, but obviously this is even at the point to where Alex Jones felt the need to pretend to call it out. That's how I see it anyway, like he does often, where he steps in and goes, he never not do this, Trump, I don't know, Trump could be lying to us all, then goes right back to buying everything he does and selling you everything he wants. Tesla's included these days, it seems. So we'll see. Maybe that was his breaking point. Maybe he's going to freak out if he does this, or maybe it was all a lie to make it appear as if he pushed back. Like, the point is, it's interesting that this is the only way it gets called out. But Donald Trump shared this. I love King Charles. Sounds good to me. And that's, of course, about the basically being invited back into the Commonwealth of the UK. I just want to include that for you so you can see the actual tweet. This is the original article we talked about. Donald Trump suggests the U.S. could join British Commonwealth. Which, again, they make the point that that's every one of them are former colonies of the UK, which, so too would be the United States if they enter back into it. And that's something that we fought away from. That was the founding of the United States, understand. So for him to just pretend like that's no big deal, regardless of whether it's, symbolic or not, this is just exactly what Republicans thought they were fighting against. The continual overlap of this whole apparatus. But now you're going to find people that try to make an argument for why that all makes sense. Now, Alex came out on March 22nd and said, I got a message for Donald Trump if you really try to make America join the British Commonwealth. 1776 will commence again. So in other words, we'll revolt against the government, which is just, it's the game that they're playing right now, I think, is obviously about destabilization. But again, maybe he really believes that. Maybe that's a line for him. But ask yourself why none of the rest of everything else is a line for him. Whether it's the shots or the New World Order or the globalism or Zionism. That's all okay. But if he joins back with this, which is obviously largely symbolic for a lot of reasons, but I argue there's much more around that than what we can see and prove. Nonetheless, I find this to be hollow. I find this to be, she doth protest too much kind of a thing. Americans everywhere are shocked by Trump's announcement that he may attempt to put King Charles at the head of the United States of America, which, I don't think you'd frame it that way. That's not exactly correct, but it definitely would be the argument of there's some kind of a hierarchy, even if symbolic, of the UK or the king. Literally reversing the world-changing achievement of the Revolution 1976, or excuse me, 1776. Then, of course, and this is what I find relevant, he puts this out the next day. Powerful intel. Don't really need those things. It says the remnants of the British Empire formed the heart of the globalist economic and cultural control system that has operated for decades. Now, King Charles's secret proposal to President Trump is a desperate attempt for the NWO to survive using America's wealth and power. The same NWO that he doesn't call out in the things he's supporting that Trump's doing. Inconsistency. But here's what I find most interesting. Okay, let's just take this at face value and say that King Charles is his proposal is the NWO trying to take advantage of Trump. Okay. So if that's the case, why wouldn't you be calling out Trump right now? Not in the sense of if you do this, then how about right now? Seeing as how Donald Trump is clearly still leaning into that, or even the fact that he proposed it, or rather said, sounds good to me. I'm just trying to highlight the small point of if this guy is, okay, that sounds good, to what you're claiming is the NWO trying to manipulate the U.S., doesn't that cause a problem for you right then? Why would you still support this person? If he's seemingly either too blind to see that, despite all of you screaming at him, which he sees, or he doesn't care. Find that very, very telling. There's just so much obvious hypocrisy and inconsistency in logic in the partisan field. According to Daily Mail, the king is expected to offer to make the U.S. the 57th member of the Commonwealth at a time when America's relationship with the EU has been strained over Ukraine and his ongoing war with Russia, which frankly, I know there's division from individuals, but from the large agenda, I find a lot of this to just be noise, but I could be wrong. The offer is being seen as a way to bolster the U.S. and United Kingdom's so-called special relationship, despite America having famously split from the British rule in 1700s. The two countries have frequently worked together on foreign policy in the 20th and 21st century. So, clearly, this is continuing. It hasn't happened yet, but Trump has since said, that sounds good to me, and that's where it stopped. My point will be that wouldn't be well, if you do the thing that you like, that's a problem. You should be going, how are you not calling that out, Trump? Why does it sound good to join with something you've been famously pushing back against? You see, my opinion, and when this comes to pass, we'll talk about it, is that I don't think that anything's going to change. I think that one of two things. Either this is going to happen, which I just think would be very, very too clumsy, too on the nose. It's obvious, right? But we've seen other things like that. Israel's doing it every day. My point would be, if it does happen, then you're going to see a rationale for why it's in the interest of America, even if it's not, and you'll see Jones toe that line. Mark my words. Or secondarily, or one of the two options would be that it never was going to happen. That it was all floated in order to present the idea that I'm going to challenge him if he does the wrong thing, even though you're blindly accepting everything else that's happening. That seems like more likely to me, but you guys can decide and we'll see what happens. Now, in the context of other things that Jones and the rest aren't calling out, which I find more clear, is that Epstein files. What happened to that, guys? Forbes reports FBI reportedly asked agents to prioritize Epstein documents and limit redactions. Okay, this is March 22nd. So we're going to pretend that they've been doing this for months now? And we're going to act like only just now, March 22nd? Now we've suddenly asked to prioritize. Yeah, maybe they can pull away from all those anti-Semitism investigations that we've provenly shown you that we've proven that they are investigating. Like, remember, it came out very clearly that they even, and this is reported by the FBI, or rather specifically, I think it was from the State Department. Either way, it was reported, pretty widely reported, that they had pulled from human trafficking investigations in order to focus on anti-Semitic investigations around the campus protests. That alone should have been a tipping point for the people, largely and rightly so, the largest group calling out a very clear problem of that very discussion, whether it's human trafficking, pedophilia, sexual abuse of children. These are very real topics that exist at the highest levels of power. That's not a question, or it's a provable fact. Dennis Hassert was third in line to the president as the speaker, right? President, vice as the speaker, third in line, and ultimately was proven to be a serial child molester, according to the judge. There's many of those examples. The point is that why would you pull away from something that serious to investigate anti-Semitism? Well, you know why, guys, if you're honest with yourselves. In this case, this is interesting because I don't think we're going to get anything out of this. And right now, suddenly, I think they're just trying to keep you on, they're leading you by the nose right now. That's what I think. Here's what Forbes says. The FBI is directing some agents to set aside other work and prioritize redacting files. Okay, why is that only happening on the 22nd? I mean, this is clearly a very important thing to the largest support base he has. Why would it be dragging this long? Well, there are other things pulling at Donald Trump, other things that have nothing to do with what Americans want. You have to see that by now. And it says, and prioritize redacting files, which is a whole other conversation, related to disgraced financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein for release. Multiple outlets reported Sunday as pressure mounts after the last month's file release was largely considered a dud. Which I want to point out something important here. Their whole game has been that this is some kind of extra. Well, I'll wait to get to the paragraph here. It says the FBI told the Wall Street Journal it has prioritized transparency with the Epstein files. And all appropriate administrative and legal requirements are being adhered to. Continuing down, it says, it's unclear. Attorney General Pam Bondi has, that's weird. It's unclear. It's unclear, period. Attorney General Pam Bondi has promised for weeks more Epstein files will be released. But neither she nor the FBI have provided a specific timeline, which, by the way, as always, if it was right now, Democrats are rightly pointing this out because it's a divide and conquer dynamic. If it was Biden doing this, the Republicans pulling their hair out, screaming about how this is a cover up. But, most of the team sport political side that's what they do, seem to be focusing on whatever they're being pointed to right now. Tesla terrorists apparently is the only thing they want to talk about. That's only the minority of the team sport Republicans, in my opinion. But it says, but neither they provided a timeline. Bondi said last week she had received a truckload of new documents relating to Epstein, which she had previously accused the FBI of withholding from the Department of Justice. Okay, I've said this 6 times now. Why isn't anybody asking for that person? Who is it? What group? March them out in front of us. Why aren't they being arrested? Wouldn't that be the deep state? If they're the ones that are still at the FBI who are withholding information, and you guys made a big old stink about that, why haven't we seen somebody held accountable for that? I think y'all know why, because I think it didn't actually happen. I think this is about dripping this out and hope, waiting to see if we buy it. And we didn't, so they step into the next argument. And it's always easy to say some other person, some holdover that we can't verify was a Biden Democrat. Why wouldn't that person be charged with a crime? Well, it says, and said FBI Director Kash Patel would give her a deadline on when he can go through the documents to protect, of course, the victims of sex trafficking. No, there is, oh, that's what it was. I'm sorry, I missed asking the question. The question was, when will more Epstein files be released? And it says, it's unclear. That's what that was. And then down here it says, is there a so-called Epstein list and what will be on it? Now, look, people talking about this, I'm pretty sure, unless it's become just kind of like a, I don't think people are referencing this as some kind of one-page list. The idea is, where is the compilation of the information showing who was actually using his services? You damn well know that is what they have. So the point is, will there be an Epstein list and what's on it? They say no. There is no evidence pointing to the existence of an Epstein list. So you guys know where this is going. Which conspiracy theorists believe contains the names of Epstein's clients and associates who may have participated in or known about his crimes. They even reference the writer from Miami Herald who did a really good job on this in the past, which kind of seems how this stuff tends to go, where she's arguing, that's fake, it's not real, that's only slandering people. Well, guys, we're not talking about some notepad with a list of names on it. We're talking about wherever it's held in multiple files, the names of people who were using his services. So we're going to pretend that they can't compile that into one list and show us who they are? I think that's what we all know is happening here, guys, because that includes both left and right, and includes judges and congressmen. I think we know that. I also think it's very obvious that it ties back to Israeli influence on this government. And all of that, the Zionist task force that's conducting this investigation around all of the things, including that Israel killed JFK, are totally not going to show you that outcome. And lastly, it says, the Justice Department gave several popular right-wing influencers binders, which read the Epstein Files Phase 1. Now, you know why I mentioned this at the time. You know why I find that especially relevant? Oh, I haven't mentioned this in a long time, but every single show, for as far back as you can look, Instagram censors this show. It happens every day. It just got shut down. Every day. I don't know why they don't just kick me off the platform. But if it was Phase 1, right? So Phase 1, obviously that implies that there are more phases to come, obviously. So if we're to believe that they put that out with the intention of releasing more files, then why did Pam Bondi act like she was aghast at how we didn't even know? They dumped all these files on us and we're going to hold them accountable for not. So you see the inconsistency there? This is them responding to your reaction, right? So Phase 1 is to let you, maybe if they don't buy it, maybe they'll just be quiet because they think more is coming. And then when we go, wait, it's all redacted and there's no information in here. She goes, oh, wait a minute, a truckload just landed in my lap and we didn't even know. Well, more will be coming. Then why was it Phase 1 then? See, there's obvious ways to see through this if you're just paying attention. The reality is, guys, they're dripping this out in ways that will never change the conversation. That's my opinion. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we get all the information and it all changes everything. But how do we not see by now that this is dishonest? There's a lot happening that shows us simple and obvious dishonesty. Now, here is I'm not familiar, but it's a kind of more partisan article written about this. So just give you more of the perception of the right on this. FBI spent the weekend redacting Jeffrey Epstein files. And you'll notice very clear criticism here. Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel still haven't lived up to their promise to release the DOJ records and notorious deceased sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, but agents are reportedly working around the clock, including over the weekend. I mean, we keep hearing this. I don't know why. Oh, they're working extra hard and diligent, are they? It's just so funny that we just get these narratives and people just report it. It's like, they should be doing this already. It should already be done. There's no reason this should be going this long, and why they're all of a sudden ramping up their efforts because they want you to think that they're doing their best. It's all narrative to me. So CNN reported Saturday that, quote, FBI agents are working around the clock, some in 12-hour shifts. So funny enough, so now you got Republicans are taking at face value what CNN tells you. That's interesting. Even though that's a joke I'm making, really, because the point is, check it for yourself. It's not about the report. Well, it matters, but it's ultimately about the source. Not CNN saying that, but where did they get that information from, where you can verify it? It says, quote, for much of the week, agents could be seen filing into a room at FBI headquarters, with some also doing the work on field offices in New York and the FBI offices. Wait, so you're telling me you have multiple offices simultaneously redacting and working on files at the same time? How does that even make sense? Especially with something this serious. But it says for hours, agents sit at the banks of computers using editing software to identify redactions required under federal laws, including the Privacy Act. The material also includes video. Oh, that's interesting. You think you're going to get video files? Probably not. What I think is interesting, though, is that why is it on March 22nd are they making this weird painted picture? They're working for hours around the clock, all the weekends. Now, wouldn't this be what they should have presented right in the beginning? It just seems like kind of a I'm skeptical, guys. I'm inherently skeptical, but it just kind of gives you the feeling of trying to get you to think we're working extra diligent just because it's not happening. Or maybe just decided, something's taking this long. I mean, the obvious point to make is that they're redacting things. So how could we take it at face value? How could we ever know? I mean, look, you could make valid arguments for why that should happen in some cases. Well, don't ever tell me national security. That is not something I'm ever going to go along with. But, people's personal information. Yes. In victims that don't want to be named. Absolutely. But it's only they will use that to remove things they don't want you to see. And you damn well know it. A justice official says that even if the latest tranche of documents doesn't satisfy questions from critics, the department is satisfied that the public will end up having access to more documents and evidence than they would have if Bondi hadn't ordered the review. Oh, good. So we have more meaningless information about things that don't relate to the case, but it's more evidence, though. It's the same with the JFK files, guys. They came out and they released a bunch of stuff that didn't change anything, most of which was already there, as I talked about with Corey Hughes, who's an expert on the topic. He made very clear points about how a lot of it was red herrings meant to get you down rabbit holes that would lead you in the wrong direction. That's why there's not much about it, guys. It was a deception, just like it was the first time. But Trump acts like, actually, I'll hold off on that. We're going to get to that in next one of these next tabs. But up here, it says Justice and FBI officials don't believe the new documents set to be released in the coming days will contain any bombshells. It's exactly what they said about JFK. They're already priming you. They're telling you it's not going to. So we know that we're not going to get the picture. And she's telling you right here, you're going to get something, so be happy with that. CNN's report comes about a month after the White House staged a public publicity stunt. This is a Republican platform in which a gaggle of pro-Israel conservative political commentators were provided binders that read the Epstein files. It turns out all the documents in the binders have already been released. You think they didn't know that, guys? Come on. And that the binders contained more redactions than the already public documents. Think about how dumb that is. Things that were already out, and they redacted more than was needed. It was already public. That is what you're dealing with. And these are the people we're talking about. A bunch of very clear pro-Israel partisan grifters that are not actually trying to inform you, in my opinion. And it says, where would we leave off? Bondi later blamed the FBI duplicity for her phony disclosure. Phony disclosure, they call it, I agree, alleging that the Bureau's New York office has been suppressing hundreds of documents. Okay, then, where's the crime? Where's the holdover Democrat that's been doing all of this? March them out in chains, right? If that doesn't happen, you damn well know that's not real. Or at the very least, there's a reason they can't do it because that'll expose something that puts them at risk. It's not about accountability, guys. They're not fighting the deep state. They're cementing the deep state. Quote, I learned from a source that the FBI field office in New York was in possession of thousands of pages of documents, Pam Bondi says, related to the investigation and indictment of Epstein. By 8 a.m. tomorrow, February 28th, the FBI will deliver the full and complete Epstein files. Why didn't we get that to begin with? Are we really going to pretend that here's one of two things. If they didn't know that was the full picture, even though random independent media people knew because it was already public, that's terrifying that they don't even know that. Which shows you how incompetent, inept they are for this position. Secondarily, or alternatively, they knew it was limited and hoped you'd buy it. Obviously. I mean, either they're incompetent or they lied to you. And so now they're saying, now we're going to get the full thing, including all records, documents, audio, and video. I guess they didn't know that was missing the first time. And materials related to Epstein and his clients. So there is a list. There is a list, regardless of how such information was obtained. Okay. So why would you tell us otherwise that there's not really a list? And that's kind of a conspiracy theory, but then make sure you tell us we have a clients. Well, that is what we want. The list of the clients, whether it's independent, different documents you put together or not. Do you really think we're going to get that? And even if we do, how can we take it at face value that it's the full picture? I think it's very interesting. Simon Godek says, Epstein was most likely a Mossad agent running a honey trap to ensnare powerful figures so Israel could blackmail them. Think about how that is related to today. The most disturbing part, he says, the first version of the Epstein files has now been handed to influencers who openly support the very agency Epstein was working for. Selective disclosure, narrative control, damage management. What a disgrace. I simply said, how are those files coming along, DC Drano? You just got Twitter filed. That's what it is, guys. This is just an extension of the Twitter files game. You base it on the clout of the people who are showing it to you, and you pretend like that's everything. That's what's happening. Now, this one I find interesting. Just it's related in a certain way, but I wanted to fit it in somewhere because I find this to be pretty crazy. Trump brags about publishing innocent people's social security numbers. Now, you could fit this in a lot of ways. It could just be clumsy incompetence. But I get the sense that this is about like the anonymous kind of, the personal information, doxing, transparency, like the idea of not being anonymous anymore in general. But that's just an overarching potential point. What happened here is he's claiming that he included their social security numbers of dead people just because we wanted to make sure you got everything of the JFK files, even though we now know for sure that was very clearly not what we got. We got a selected, an edited, nothing new, many deceptions, but because you got dead people's social security numbers, which by the way turned out to be people who are not dead, he wants you to believe that you got everything. That's how this game is being played. Now it could just be incompetence. Maybe they thought they were dead. Maybe they didn't check because they thought that would make it look like you were more real. These people seem to be flying by the seat of their pants. It says Donald Trump bragged about releasing the social security numbers of hundreds of people during the anticlimactic release of JFK files. Quote, he says, 80,000 pages of the documents is a lot to sift through. Our reporter said to Trump, I don't even think we got 80,000 pages. It says, can you just tell us who killed Kennedy? That's what the reporter asked. Quote, well, I was given the task of releasing that, he says. Many presidents have gone through it and they haven't released. Well, they have. Just like you the last time, it wasn't anything new. And I said, quote, release. He did it. And it says, we even release social security numbers. And by the way, even for a dead person, seems like a really weird and strange thing to do since it doesn't help anybody, but it does create the possibility for fraud. Now it says, I didn't want anything deleted, even though they deleted and hid a lot. It says, they said, so what about Social Security? People long gone. We gave Social Security. We gave everything. And the rest is for you to look at. These Social Security numbers, the article reports, are from potentially hundreds of people who are alive, not long gone. Now, had they just been arguing that with no evidence, I wouldn't be reporting it to you. Turns out, one of them, a Reagan-era Justice Department attorney and Trump's own former campaign lawyer, Joseph DeGenova, apparently was furious about the release of his personal data. It says, quote, I intend to sue the National Archives. He told USA Today. It says, quote, they violated the Privacy Act. Excuse me, got a hiccup. You can read it for yourself, include it. He's literally speaking on the record and says, a former church committee staffer also slammed Trump. Your administration doxed former public servants who staffed 1977 to 79 congressional investigation by revealing their social security numbers. Many are still alive. Completely unnecessary, because even if they were dead, it wouldn't be necessary. And contributed nothing to the JFK assassination's understanding. Government accountability lawyer Mark Zaid wrote on X, I trust you will provide them free credit monitoring, right? The federal government and its agencies are barred from sharing personal records. Of course, there's not going to be any accountability for that. They do whatever they want right now. By the way, so do most administrations, but this has been especially obvious lately. The bottom line is, if this was a clumsy accident, that's really embarrassing. And it does kind of line up with what I think of these people, all of them, Biden included, left and right. My point, though, is that it feels like there's something more to this. Maybe we'll see it flesh out. Maybe it's to distract us from the Social Security conversation that's happening. I don't know. But that's wild. Now ask yourself, while they're all screaming about doxing, in many cases where it doesn't even actually apply, like the Doge employees, they're literally doxing people, maybe by accident. I just find that to be insanely stupid. Now, found this really interesting video, by the way. Checked out these weird little animals. For the podcast, you're going to look for yourself. Some new species, I guess. Or it's an AI video, one of these games that are being played today, which is what it is. Now, this is an artificial intelligence created video of something creepy and weird looking. Now, I just want to include it because I thought it was wild, and I think it's very interesting to see how almost impossible to tell these things are becoming. Okay, that is, I think this is where we're going in the world. Now, what I think is really important is how long we've been talking about deep fakes and where this kind of goes. I mean, obviously, the point is we're well beyond that. We're in that age. And that's why I keep saying, how has the other shoe not dropped? How have we not seen some major example? I think we just got one of the earliest, very big potential examples. Even though it's not very consequential in the political sense, other than embarrassing. It's interesting that it came out about J.D. Vance and Elon Musk right at this interesting time. This is just weird. It's a very weird video about these creepy looking things. My point is, this could be done by somebody with influence and nobody would question it. Especially if it wasn't this wild, if it was something pretty much in line with what's happening, but they faked it. That's probably already happened and we don't even know. Like, we're in that time frame right now, okay? Even weirdly enough, just on a side note, Elon Musk just put out a thing kind of referencing the Grok image editor and kind of made a joke about Stalin and the editing of the picture out, even though, the point is like, look at what Grok can do. And he posted the Stalin picture where they took the guy out, even though that's an old image from Stalin who did that well before they had the technology. I just thought that was, joke or not, it's kind of an interesting, precursor, kind of a, what do they call it in writing? Like it's symbolic of what's to come, foreshadowing. I think we're coming to a point where we're going to start to see a waterfall of stuff like this. Now, here's what I brought this up for the real reason. I don't know whether this is real or not. Now, my point is not that we know it's real, but rather that this is where we get these interesting debates where if this is real, you're getting pushback from people on his side that claiming it's fake, right? But if it's fake, you're also getting people claiming that they can prove that it's real. And so it becomes this partisan forever divide. And I think it's really interesting. So Christopher Webb says, leaked audio of J.D. Vance in a jealous rant. Well, and so, it doesn't matter because we don't know for sure. I'll let you listen to it. And you can tell me what you think, and then we'll show you the back and forth of the debate. And I'm sorry, it's very weird and loud feedback. So I won't speak, I won't cut, I won't stop. You can turn it up, turn it down, whatever you want. I'll wait for it to stop, and then I'll jump in. But what he basically does go on to say is that, Elon wasn't elected, I was elected, and Elon's making us all look bad, that kind of thing. So here it goes.
Thing that he's doing is getting criticized in the media, and he says that he's helping, and he's not. He's making us look bad. He's making me look bad. And I'll tell you this, and he wouldn't like it if I said it, but he's not even immigrant. He is from South Africa, and he's cosplaying as this great American leader in a room that has the portraits of some of the greatest men that ever lived in this country. And he has the audacity to act like he is an elected official. I am an elected official. I am the important one in this situation, not him. So if he wants to tank the economy and his cars, maybe that's what he deserves.
If he wants to tank the economy and his cars, maybe that's what he deserves. Right? He's from South Africa, cosplaying as an American. It's a very interesting conversation. And the way that it's done, it very well could be real. Like, it's not too bombastic. It relates to very clear things that are happening, but it also could be manufactured to make them look stupid, which I think they're doing well enough on their own, personally. All sides are, but interesting though. Okay. So here, back to the conversation. This person simply says it's AI manipulated, and Vance's communication director confirmed this. Now, I haven't seen that. I looked, I didn't see that. But they referenced this. This guy is the one she's pointing to, and he says this audio is 100% fake and most certainly not the vice president, and links to a thing that's now been deleted. So that kind of makes you feel the other direction. Maybe he got tricked. Who knows? The other part is interesting is this person, and this was the guy that posted it and then deleted it. You can check for yourself. Maybe there's an update. Just make sure I miss anything. So here is the other one. Now, I looked into this myself. This person simply posts his results that says it's real from one of these AI detect audio, right? Now, I tried to do it on free ones, and I got mixed results. It's good, it's real, it's fake, it's real, it's fake. Sort of like you get with those images. So I didn't even think it's worthy of bringing up. My point on this is it's not, this point is not about whether this is real. Because frankly, I find it pretty inconsequential. Whether he's a petty person arguing about Elon, you don't need them and their petty disagreements to influence your opinion on these people. Their actions should be enough. That's all that really matters. The point, though, is we know this is coming. If this is real, there'll be people that will defend to their death that it was fake in order for political reasons. If it's fake, there will be people that will argue forever that it was real because they want to believe that about them. This is what they've created with this partisan divide. And this is the problem in this country, largely. I think that's fascinating and terrifying at the same time because we're already seeing this and probably have already seen it and we didn't even know. Very interesting. Now, on that note, in general, about the technological direction, okay, a lot of this is going, I mean, I think in a way, this could lead to this conversation where they say, we need to verify who's posting what and who you are. Otherwise, this is going to get out of control. Like, wait until somebody posts some like very, very damaging video of the president or something like that. How long until they roll that into, well, we can't allow that anymore. I mean, Trump right now is making an issue, which I'm not going to get into, about some painting that actually doesn't even look that bad. It's like a painting about him that almost looks, I would argue it's one of it makes him look better than he looks. And he's like screaming about taking the painting down and it's just so petty. My point is, you can see that very clearly going on where somebody puts a deep fake out about Trump and all of a sudden it becomes, well, we need to verify everybody everywhere online because we can't allow this. Or maybe it's some kind of major false flag event that rolls in the same thing. So you can see where this might be building. So let's talk about digital IDs for a second. We talked about the idea when they were pushing the SAVE Act, which was a flimsy overlap for trying to roll in digital IDs. July 9th, the SAVE Act, Real ID, and ID 2020, using the two-party illusion and the election to usher in digital IDs. Now, it didn't necessarily work, but they're still building. Every one of these moments has been a building block, and they're still going forward with it. Still going with the biometric direction. They're still talking about all of these things. So my point at the time was you had the SAVE Act, which was only part of it. It very clearly outlined Real ID compliant identification, which, by the way, that's digital ID. I've made this point in this show, and I'll briefly go over it again. But there were other options, right? As I mentioned, even this part coming up, passport, for example. Okay. My point was when this combines with the other side of the conversation or whatever they decide to roll out next, where they create a situation where now in a different conversation, we make it where you're only able now to use digital aspects for this and for that. So then in those contexts, well, you can't use that passport in digital versions. Okay, then you still have this version, Real ID aspect. And then eventually they go, well, this is needed for this and security, and so we'll just X out the rest of it. So even though the SAVE Act still says you can use these two things, a larger bill says we can't use those in any context, so suddenly all you're able to use is Real ID compliant. It's actually very simple. And that's how they point at the other side and say, you're responsible. It doesn't matter because they both rolled it out. Watch this show. I think it's really crazy how obvious this is. So here's one post from November 2020 to show you two things, where this is going and how this is a rollover from both administrations, right? Because this was being done during Trump's administration. It was picked up and carried through Biden's administration, and now it is continuing in Trump's administration. Author of U.S. Digital ID Bill discusses central role of biometrics in ID 2020 webinar. So the ID 2020 aspect is the larger conversation. This goes back to something we talked about over COVID-19 even before. ID 2020 defector speaks on, quote, what they called techno-solutionism with immunity passports and the vaccine deception. She literally resigned from ID 2020 because she said they were literally using this to roll out digital ID and some kind of techno-solutionism and all sorts of other things. The point about that is to recognize that is digital ID and a lot of others. And the Real ID aspect is another aspect of that same web. And we've made that very clear in previous shows. Now it says, when they are finally established, U.S. digital IDs will likely be based on smartphones and biometrics, according to Bill Foster, U.S. Congressman, the author of the Improving Digital Identity Act, which was 2020, I think, then in 2023, and by the way, still active, which is currently before Congress with bipartisan support, still to this day. This is an ID 2020 webinar. Now he says central bank digital assets and digital currencies will significantly drive digital identity efforts in the coming years, which are all happening. Fortunately, Foster says, and to be clear, by the way, central bank we know the private side of it is largely what Trump's leaning into. That's the same problem and way worse. It says, fortunately, Foster says there are a number of things Congress can do to make portable, reliable, and secure digital IDs a reality. Noting that the Treasury Department is focused on the issue and will likely continue to be so in the next administration. So that's Trump's side handing off to Biden. And yes, they did continue that. Now it says Foster notes that he worked with Congressman Mike Kelly to remove the ban on federal funding for a unique federal identifier through an amendment to the labor HHS bill. If the amendment, which passed the House unanimously, is passed by Senate, it will allow HHS to move forward on patient ID for Americans, which Foster says could save tens of thousands of lives. So what you saw there was the first element of this in medical field. So this is how it's always incremental. But it says the ban, which prevented Americans from being identified as the same patient in medical facilities across the street from each other for the past 25 years, Foster says, at the feet of Foster lays the feet of former Congressman Ron Paul. The point was about your personal privacy, right? The idea being, you can, and what it goes on to say, what has changed in the politics around that ban, Foster says, is that the need to end doctor shopping to address the opioid crisis. You see how this is always, it's one thing to the next. Whether that was the plan, they're using something they created, the opioid crisis, and they've never truly dealt with, to argue that no, they're only looking for different doctors because they're shopping around for who can get drugs for them. Or what 99% of us do is get a second opinion. Remember when that used to be the only logic we understood? Go ask another doctor to make sure that this one's not ridiculous. Today, they call you a conspiracy theorist because you're supposed to take what the apparatus tells you because they're all a bunch of monotone followers. So the you is the argument that you're just looking for drugs to roll out your digital aspect, and what they say, which removed the privacy that was created there. Now you're identified. Now it goes on to say and make clear the weakness in the system of siloed patient identities. So now what they're saying is you check in at the hospital over here, the hospital across the street gets all that data. Now it says biometrics are going to play a huge role in all of this. Part of that involves the duplication of the state driver's licenses through the real ID system, but more needs to be done. So just referencing to what we're now being pushed into to argue that's one step in this direction. Very clear. That's 2020 for you. Okay. Here is the continuation to 2023. Oh, no, sorry. This was the 2020 bill. Bipartisan House bill targets improving digital identity verification. That was 2020, Trump's administration. Now, the Improving Digital Identity Act in general says the concept of this was just the general search for it. And I thought this was relevant. I was looking for the act and this came up. The concept of improving digital identity has evolved significantly since 2020 this is interesting, a notable push in 2025 towards the adoption of digital identity technologies to enhance, guess what, guys? Aviation security and operational efficiency. God, I don't know why this can't be this obvious to everybody. Now, that's not to say that there's not obvious issues with aviation. It's certainly not just woke politics. That's certainly not the case. That plays a factor in a lot of things, but to argue it's insane how obvious this all is. We're watching them use something, in many cases, that was wildly manipulated, like the fog or the drones or all these different conversations, to argue that it's all because of now they roll out the adoption of digital ID technologies to enhance the aviation security and efficiency. One more arm of it. One more leg, one more faction. It continues to grow until you turn around and realize you're already in it and didn't even know. The International Air Transport Association has called for the faster adoption of digital identity solutions, including verifiable credentials and decentralized identifiers, to strengthen document integrity and reduce fraud and unauthorized act. You see where it goes. Narrative, excuse. All it is digital ID in every aspect of your life. Now, we push back on the main one, right? But it's not happening right in front of you at this point. Now it's just in case you want to do that, in case you want to go over here. The next one is important. It's about traveling domestically. That's happening today. That's the point about 2025. Now it says the IATA's One ID initiative allows passengers to verify their travel documents before departure and use biometric recognition to move through the airports, streamlining the process of ensuring compliance with global regulations and privacy standards. Okay, why exactly is the Trump administration leaning into global regulations and I thought it was America first and nationalism and all the, no, it's all narrative. They are continuing the same Great Reset technocratic agenda that we saw rolled out during COVID-19, which, by the way, was also Donald Trump's administration. But don't take that for me telling you it's one side. It's not. It's all of it. Digital identity technologies are becoming essential components of cybersecurity. Think Israel, which is the vast majority of that process right now, especially since NGO Group and Pegasus. Donald Trump just leaned into those groups, and that is one of the most notorious for spying on you, stealing your data, and way worse than that. But it says, and advanced threat detection with AI, zero trust security models, and biometric authentication becoming increasingly important. Check this out. This is from 2020. It's back to the techno-solutionism. It's very interesting to see how much of this relates to what's happening today. Now, this was the overlap to the real ID point, though, right? So it's scattered, right? It's the boiling frog. It's incremental. Little step here, little step there. My point with the real ID point aspect of it was Biden really pushing his side of it, which was the mobile driver's licenses. I brought this up many times. So here, I just want to reiterate, this is still now under Trump's administration coming out in a different arm. Mobile driver's licenses, or MDLs, are digitized versions of the information on physical driver's licenses and identification cards and are stored on mobile electric devices like smartphones. So they market it as a convenience until they later go, well, now that's all we'll take. That's how this goes. The Real ID Act and regulations prohibit federal agencies, including TSA, from accepting for Real ID, quote, official purposes, MDLs that are not Real ID compliant. When Real ID enforcement begins on May 7th, oh, it's coming up. We'll talk about that next. Next month, or rather, excuse me, the month after, so May 7th. We're about to roll into April. May 7th, that's when Real ID compliance is enforced in this country. Now, the mobile driver's license part of this is interesting because they're now saying, well, you can have that, but you also have to make sure that's real. Now, why would that be? Well, because they're one and the same. They're two parts of the same conversation. They have to be intertwined because otherwise it wouldn't line up. It's about the control structure, guys. Now, this is from January 1st of this year. New travel requirements for Americans in 2025. What you need to know. So think about this from the context of the Great Reset and all the different things Republicans thought they were pushing back on, now rolling out during Trump's administration. Taking a spontaneous trip, whether in the United States or abroad, might be harder for travelers in 2025, thanks to new requirements. Now, this overlaps with two things. I'm only focusing on the U.S. part of it, but there's also part about the U.K. Apparently, they're making it much, much more difficult to travel to the U.K., which I think is just about continuing to make sure that you don't get outside, that you're in a controlled bubble of information. My opinion. Starting May 7th, every American aged 18 or older traveling domestically must use Real ID instead of other driver's licenses or identification cards at airports. The Real ID is an updated driver's license or ID card that meets federal security standards. So what this is, guys, whether they do it out of the gate or not, is when you do that, you get a digital ID that's on their system, which is essentially in a way what's working today, but that you can read into this, go in depth on this. We've done multiple shows on this. That's very clearly part of it. Digital ID and the Real ID are the same agenda. So what they're doing is not only rolling out their Real ID new license, which is very trackable, some of which they are RFID overlap, but this is more so about the idea of getting you stepping in the direction of the Real ID compliant digital ID direction. And once you step into this, which they're forcing us all, that's not a choice anymore by May 7th, it'll be a easy step next. Now it says, a spokesperson for the Transportation Security Administration, the security theater that is TSA, says TSA is working to avoid checkpoint delays by encouraging all travelers to obtain Real ID compliant or ID or compliant ID or another form of acceptable ID before May 7th. It says, while the proposed rule would allow TSA to consider a phased approach to enforcement, so they could decide to go, well, we'll do it slowly. It says TSA fully intends to begin Real ID enforcement on May 7th. Interesting. So it's just basically, this was important to make sure you understand the limits. I don't want to scare anybody here. I believe that's where it's going, which it'll be entirely, which why wouldn't it be with everything else they've ever done? But here's what it says. As of May 7th, you will need a Real ID. And I'll get into what that exactly is in a second, or another acceptable form of identification to board domestic flights and access certain federal facilities. However, Real ID is not, at the moment, required for other means of transportation like driving or taking trains between states. But I have to understand that this is this will, mark my words, my opinion. Once this goes into effect, it'll be a short period of time before you then required to have it to cross state lines. Why wouldn't it? I mean, it's the logic of how these things apply. This is incremental steps. That's what I believe. But just, at the moment, this will stop you from flying anywhere, essentially, anywhere, domestically, internationally, unless you have their Real ID. That's a huge restriction for people that have to travel for anything. I mean, think about the COVID-19 timeframe, right? Where most people argue didn't really want the thing, didn't really believe it, or they knew it was a false, but they got pressured into it. They have to do this for their job. They have children. They have to go to school. That's the majority of people, guys. That's why it's always been a manipulation. So this is from March 24th, today. Real ID sparks massive wait times in New Jersey. Now, I actually think it's just like with COVID, where they're kind of falsely putting out this pressure. Hurry, get in line. You might miss it to get people to rush into something that nobody wants, because that's actually the data. Nobody wants this right now. The majority of people aren't doing this. So I think it's funny that they frame it as like, you better hurry. There's a wait 2 hours long. It's always how this works. But it says residents of the Garden State, New Jersey, in addition to all other states and 5 U.S. territories, are scurrying to renew or modify their identification to be Real ID compliant by May 7th. U.S. travelers are being warned that the Department of Homeland Security and the Transportation Security Administration, the 2 agencies enforcing the new provisions, to get their new IDs if they plan to board domestic flights, access certain federal facilities, or I guess enter nuclear facilities, which sure, we don't often do that. But the point is the Department of Homeland Security, also TSA and the DHS. This is going to become a national point. Travelers who do not present a Real ID compliant license or acceptable alternative beginning May 7th will not be permitted through airport security. So you can't even get through the basic level of security if you don't have a Real ID compliant ID. Passports remain, for the time being, required for international travel. So at the moment, you do still need the passport to leave the country. But I think as it also references, let me see. Make sure I'm not, yeah, I think it references it down here. Yeah, we'll come back to it. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong one. No, I guess it's not this one. I'll wait on that. I think the reference is about whether the passport, it's a point already made. That at the moment, I believe in some cases, there will be something like a birth certificate, passport, whatever they'll allow you to use in certain contexts. But at some point, as they're already told you, by the way, they're transitioning into digital everything. So at some point, those will be no longer valid for whatever reason they justify. And then you'll be forced into this exact frame. That's what this is about, guys. It's not even secret. You can look it up on their plans. Read through the actual website. They tell you this is where it's all going. Now it says Real ID compliance will be shown directly on the top portion of citizens' cards. That's where you get like these little circle with the star, things like that. Identified either by a yellow star, black star, or a star within a yellow circle, a star with a black circle, or a yellow bear. It's ridiculous. Why would you not just make it the same? I think there's a reason for that. I think this is about tracking purposes and location. You can decide for yourself. Now it says in 2005, Congress passed the Real ID Act at the recommendation of the 9/11 Commission. That's what it goes back to. This is same old thing. Patriot Act forward, using their psyops to get you in this position to set standards for the issuance of sources of identification, such as driver's licenses and identification cards. The TSA said that as of January 2024, only approximately 56% of the driver's licenses in circulation were Real ID compliant. That's despite them screaming about this for 10, 15 years now. In 34 states, less than 60% of them were compliant, and in 22 states, less than 40% were compliant. But hurry, there's no space in line. But my point is that clearly, guys, this has been a long thing coming, right? From the 9/11 discussion. I mean, it's all about driving you into this position. Driver's license identification. I mean, think about the idea that why should you even be required to have to identify yourself? Why are you required to have, in some cases, in some states, required to carry ID? I mean, there's going to be plenty of statists out there that are going to scream about why you have to, why it's necessary, and you're going to cause trouble. I don't care about any of that. I care about my personal freedom, and I care about personal sovereignty. I care about the idea of liberty. So the fact that they have ever argued that you have to have identification in and of itself is the problem. That was the early step. We're now on different kinds and how you verify those. But it says the article continues, my main complaint, and this was, where was her name? Anna Marie somebody speaking about this and her experience. My main complaint is that I paid good money, she says, for a TSA pre-check. And it says they not only required my birth certificate, they fingerprinted me. When I called Trenton to see if they would accept that as ID, they didn't even know what it was. How crazy that is. These are just grifters, man. The fact, fingerprints, like this is clearly not just about what's more secure. It's about funneling you into what they need. Now, so she also wondered why her pre-check won't work as an ID for domestic flight travel, right? Saying this new process is making more people like her jump through hoops when previous protocols worked fine. Arguably might even be better. But see, it's not about your security and privacy. It's about their ability to influence, control, have a full picture all the time of where everybody is and what's happening. Not for your benefit. And realize, guys, that already, like she's talking about, why would you need to go through these hoops to verify the real ID when you have your ID, your picture's on it, that's me, here's my birth certificate. No, we need more than that. I mean, it shows you what it's really about. Those things very clearly prove that's you. They just want more on file. It's the same we're dealing with these platforms. Give us more biometric data. You don't need that to verify who you are. They're making it out to be terrorism or threat to children, things that are going to get you to jump at shadows so you fall in line. Not even to say those things aren't real and important. It's about them using what you care about. But it says I must renew in person, not online. Now, I thought that was relevant. You go in these things, you're being, I think there's more going on about facial, all these places have their biometric scans and the facial recognition, and you're standing there in line, they do this camera scan. So online, maybe you could try to manipulate that. I don't know. Lastly, it says enhanced driver's licenses. I found this interesting. I haven't heard about this. EDL, only currently issued in Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Vermont, and Washington, will also be accepted as official real ID purposes, but will contain no star markings. ELDs can be identified by having an image of the U.S. flag or the word enhanced at the top of the card. Well, let's look at that. It says, enhanced driver's license are state-issued documents that confirm your identity and U.S. citizenship, allowing you to cross the border. So why would that be the exception? Well, it says EDLs contain radio frequency identification chips that assist with rapid identification checks at federal borders. So those too dumb to know that they're being used, right? It'll be more convenient for you. Here, let me jam a chip in your arm, obviously in your card. But my joke being that, why would you ever want that to get a little bit of an inconvenience? People that don't know what's going on, I argue, but it says the card uses a unique identification number that links to information contained in a secure DHS database. Well, now you see why. You see, that's what they're after. So that one's okay as one of the only alternatives because that already has it all in line. We want you to, jump through one of these hoops, right? That's where this is going. We all know this. Oh, by the way, on this conversation point about identification, I wanted to point this out because somebody else told me this, and I should have done it at the beginning of the show, quite honestly. I've had many, many people reach out to me and say, I tried to watch this on Rumble, and no matter what I did, it was trying to get me to verify. They have an account. They're on Rumble. And as they go to comment, and it goes, verify, what's your phone number? Take a picture of your face, like weird things on Rumble to be able to engage with our videos. Now, I don't think maybe it's not just about me. Maybe, who knows? But why? You already have an account. You're already on the platform. I think you all know why, guys. If you especially recognize that Rumble, despite the effort and the claims and the framing and the marketing, is exactly like YouTube. I don't mean in the sense of content or what they're doing or what they promote. I'm talking about the background. It is the same mainstream infrastructure, the same Amazon cloud services, the same everything. Why would it be any different? I'm waiting for that rug to get pulled. I hope I'm wrong, obviously, but I'm not going to lean into that. That's why we should lean into things like BitChute, for example, or Odyssey, ones that are out there that are, I even hear, I'll leave that off for now, but the point is both of them actively fighting, in many cases to their detriment, to allow absolute free speech. Anyway, I found that interesting, and this is what it says when I looked it up. Rumble requires users to verify their identity before accessing certain features, which is most platforms. But down here it says, additionally, some users have reported difficulties, that's what I'm hearing as well from a lot of people, with commenting on live streams, even after verifying their accounts. In such cases, adding a phone number to account may resolve the issue. So just recognize where this is going. That should not be okay with people. There's no need for any of that. Now, on that point I mentioned earlier, just as a really quick point, Trump wants a golden dome capable of defending the entire United States. Now, the main point or the first point that I mentioned is, strategically, logistically, financially, it's crazy. Hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, there's different reports about what they think. The point is nobody seems to know. Basically, have to have some major investigatory effort to find out what we'll need. And right now, they don't seem to know. They're just going earmark billions for this is what Trump is really pushing. And they're saying strategically, it doesn't make any sense. U.S. military officials are scrambling to develop what they call a Golden Dome defense system, basically just as he says, just developing akin to Iron Dome for Israel, which, by the way, the U.S. government funds entirely, or rather you do, as then dumps billions on top of it for continuing genocide. But that's you fund that, and then they sell things back to you that you paid for. Often how that works. But says at a time the Pentagon is looking to cut budgets, the Trump administration has ordered military officials to ensure future funding for the Golden Dome. So one more multi-billion dollar project as we pretend we're cutting costs is reflected as a new budget estimates all the way to 2030. Always with this time frame, guys. Something's going on, and we all know it. But the system itself remains undefined beyond a name. Now, it says likely cost billions of dollars to construct, much more than that when you listen to some of the more educated estimates. Trump has repeatedly insisted the U.S. needs a missile defense program similar to Israel's Iron Dome. That comes from Israel. It says the whole conversation. But the systems are orders of magnitude apart. Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system selectively protects, if you even believe that. I mean, quite frankly, I think it's all an illusion. Not that they don't have things, but it's either it doesn't work properly, which we've even seen. They ended up accidentally or maybe on purpose blowing up a bunch of children playing soccer, and they blamed it on the other group. That was very clearly an Iron Dome missile. We have a video of it. The point here, or rather in the general sense, is, rocket lands in a field, and, there's a narrative that's spun up every time. Things fly in the air. There's no evidence, another shot. It's about creating the illusion that things are happening. Not every single time, but I've proven this over the years. And then we've even shown when they get real attacks that those things don't seem to be able to stop anything. So I think there's worth asking whether there's a larger kind of money laundering illusion around all this anyway, especially when he's going to build one 100 times the size of what they have. But it says he wants to build a space-based missile defense system capable of defending the entire United States from advanced missiles. It says, for one thing, Israel is tiny. The source familiar with the ongoing internal discussions about the Golden Dome said it's 100% feasible to blanket Israel in things like radars, combination of mobile and fixed interceptors, right? Quote, how are you going to do that in the United States? It's a good question. He says you can't do it at just the borders and the shoreline because in intercontinental ballistic missiles, they can re-enter the atmosphere over Kansas. He says still, Trump issued an executive order during his first week in office ordering Hegseth to submit a plan for developing and implementing the next generation missile defense shield by March 28th. That's 4 days away. Down here, it says such a system would require thousands of interceptors in low Earth orbit. So let's think back to Elon Musk and his system they're building to intercept even a single North Korean missile or any missile, it argues, according to the reports which had studied the feasibility of the ballistic missile defense for years. A single interceptor in orbit is almost never at the right place and time to rapidly intercept the ballistic missile launch, so you need exponentially more to ensure adequate coverage. So my question becomes, is that even what this is about? Is this a rationale to roll out one of the most invasive security systems and surveillance apparatus that we've ever seen? It says, we estimate that a constellation of about 16,000 interceptors would be needed to attempt to counter a rapid salvo of 10 solid propellant ICBMs. 10. 16,000 just the interceptors just to stop 10. It says in the Red Sea, the U.S. has fired scores of multi-million-dollar interceptor missiles at Houthi drones and missiles that cost a fraction of the price. The fiscal imbalance gets far worse when a system is in space, according to John Tierney. Okay, remember what Massey just said? Well, we need to find another location for the $50 billion in war spending, right? Well, Yemen seems to be starting that. And what he's saying is we're spending billions to knock down things worth $100. And it says a former Democratic congressman who held years of hearings on these missiles spoke up about this. And it says it's a joke. It's basically a scam. He says now the executive director at the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation, that's him, says he ripped Trump for being, quote, willing to throw billions and billions and billions of dollars at something that won't work. Now, whether it does or not, there's two things, obviously. You're going to be spending an obscene amount of money for something that might or might not work, like a lot of the jet programs we work on. But overall, you're going to need to build out a massive system of surveillance and interceptors and by the way, things that are going to have radiation, energy all over this country, 5G and everything else. I mean, guys, this is not what we want. Not what most people, not in either side. Maha is all about stopping a lot of this stuff. To me, it's about all those things together. And on top of that, recognizing that Israel is immersed in all of this conversation, whether it's all the things we've already talked about or not, or Trump himself, and it's an Iron Dome overlap, which probably means that Israel will be involved with this. And this is going to be something built around everything. There's so many examples of where this all goes. Or how about even just the last one about whether we want to spend all the money on this when it's something that is arguably questionable in Israel. And is that in the interest of Americans want right now, spending more money? Now, on to the Tesla point about this, which is very important because I think this is not the Tesla conversation itself, but how this ties into the Great Reset direction. Like just the electric vehicle point, or rather, more importantly, the self-driving car discussion. Well, as we discussed recently, weirdly timed around all of this, Tesla recalls most Cybertrucks due to the trim detaching from the vehicle, which was causing accidents, blah, blah, blah. And this is March 20th, understand. But there's already been a very clear collapse in the Tesla stock price. This company seems to be struggling, whether it's politically motivated or not, well before this big push to go after domestic terrorists, which I think is obviously about something else. But so you understand it, this is wild to me. Tesla is recalling nearly all the Cybertrucks in the country. And if you didn't know this, this is currently the eight 10 minus 2, 8 recalls just since 2024. What car company could exist with that? That's being subsidized. This is not about selling cars. It can't be. The recalled vehicles represent a vast majority of all the Cybertrucks on the road. Demand for the unconventional electric vehicle, the pickup, the Cybertruck, that's what it is, had already weakened toward the end of the last year. Following several delays, the car's sales are a fraction of Tesla's overall shipments, which in 2024 came to $1.79 million. That's it. In 2024, Tesla topped the list for U.S. recalls. All of Tesla, not just the Cybertruck, all of it, with its vehicles accounting for 5.1 million callbacks. I mean, we talked about this for years, well before Elon Musk in the White House, the idea of these cars just crashing all over the place. Every other day I was seeing one of these and nobody said a word about that. They never got they recalled like small things, but not pulling them off the market entirely, even though that's wildly, because Elon Musk is a contractor for the government, guys. This is about, I think personally, about mapping these things out, right? Getting to the point where these driverless cars will become the norm. That's the Great Reset. That's what they wanted. Now we forget that because Elon Musk makes it into a cyber. I mean, it's wild how obvious this is. Jumping ahead slightly, I thought this was hilarious. I just saw this. I thought this morning, and I said, and just like that, Republicans now support electric vehicles. But just the right ones, though, they're laughing at you. This ridiculous gif was so perfect. This guy rolls up dresses George Washington with American flag, and it says America with a Cybertruck. Maybe it broke down. The point is clearly how Republicans were largely pushing back on that, which I'll show you more in a second. And that's why most of the Democrats are the ones that own these cars, both of them. And then they started pushing back on Elon because he was politically motivated. And then they motivated all the Republican side to jump up and go, Tesla is America. And all of just like that, you're supporting the Great Reset direction, like everything else is happening. We'll come back to this. Now, Rodney, to the point about spying on you, pointed this out. Thank you. He says, hashtag Palestine will be free. Of course, for that, they probably call him a racist. This is fascinating, and I think very important. Now, this is what he wrote, and I'll show you where he gets it from, and then directly to the actual Tesla Cybertruck forum where they're discussing these things. That's where it comes from. He says, a Tesla Cybertruck owner says he's blowing past his 1.28 terabyte data cap after buying a truck. Think of like your phone or whatever else. Like, why they have to pay for that? You have to pay for data for a car. Why would you want that? It's like because it's a new toy, right? That's like average people can't afford something like that, especially if they can afford a car. Let alone the idea that the obvious point is if there's data, that means there's an exchange of information. Now it says the internet spikes coincided with Cybertruck updates. And he goes, I'm trying to understand how my Cybertruck uses so much data. I've never come close to using the 1.28 terabyte data, which is a lot, cap on my plan. But since getting my truck in November, I've gone over 2 of the 3 billing cycles. And it says, to his surprise, Ben reports that he checked his data usage, and lo and behold, the Cybertruck transmitted 940 gigabytes. That's almost the entire, that's so 1,000, I believe, is 1 terabyte of data in just 1 month. He continued to write, I looked at my internet traffic and which client was using what over the last 30 days, and I was shocked to see 940 gigabytes of data usage from my Cybertruck. So what do you think that is? It's not hard to recognize, guys. That's all the information. That's where you're going, what you're doing, how you drive. It's all the data. They're dumping back everything. That's not even a secret. I'll show you next. Why would you want that? And how is that not alarming for the very people that were screaming about that, rightly so, 30 seconds ago? It's because a lot of the conversation, largely the ones with the voices to say something to make it known, are being used, are being played, they're being gaslit. Or they're caught up in the Elon saving the world golden age nonsense and they've lost touch with reality. Thank you, Rodney, for pointing this out. So Torque News is the one that reported this. It comes directly from the Cybertruck back and forth, as you can see. I'm trying to understand how my Cybertruck used so much data. And you can see it says, and this is what's important. It actually goes through, he posts the images, engages, the verification process and everything in this. He's going on to, it goes back and forth. You can read it for yourself. It's all right here. It's exactly what we just read to you. The article does the same thing. Tesla truck owner says he's blowing past his data. That's really the only point of this. I'm going to go next to showing you very clear evidence of this. This is showing you what he said right there. I'm trying to understand how my Cybertruck uses so much data. And then I did want to show you this too. So if these are relevant to you, you can look and see the actual spikes in data, the time of it. It says in comparison to the data usage for my wife's model, same time frame. A lot less. It's interesting. So this guy says, he's arguing you turn it off. I find that hard to believe. But he goes, I'm curious why there is so much HTTP traffic. Each one, 8 to 9 gigabytes, and these updates. I mean, you go read through this for yourself. It's fascinating. Now, here's what's important. Knowing that this is exchanging almost a terabyte of data from this guy. First, let's not forget, that's why I use this picture today. This all weirdly started with the psychological operation. I don't know how we forgot that, right? So we've got a Cybertruck that blew up out front of Trump Tower. What did the right do? Muslims, terrorists. Oh, except they were both from Fort Bragg. That's right. That was the story, in case you forgot. You mean Fort Bragg, which is rife with previous psychological operations? Insane. And this got kind of kicked aside. There's a few reports about certain things, and everyone just rushed into the next topic. Wild. And then all of a sudden, we start seeing this weird Cybertruck push. I mean, come on. And the title was Fifth Generation Warfare, Drones, Fog, False Flags, and Political Destabilization. Look at how prescient that was. Look at where we are. Now, this is just a random search, and I'll show you directly from Security Week. And this is all very easy to see. Tesla privacy concerns. Tesla's vehicles are equipped with an array of sensors because they arguably have to be able to do the self-driving thing, right? But those are sensors outward and inward, looking at you. And cameras that collect a wide range of data, including vehicle location information, video recordings. Why? Now, it says, despite Tesla's claims that camera recordings remain anonymous and are not linked to you or your vehicle, then why do they need them? Here's the important part. Former employees have alleged that these videos were shared among Tesla employees, potentially compromising your privacy. Now, think about this. These are the kind of people he's working around him in Doge. These 20-something people, this is the same kind of grouping of people that would laugh about you behind the scenes because they think they can. The same people that have read and write access in $6 trillion databases, who we've already been proven are using your personal data to train their AI models. That came from Congress. Just think about how crazy that is. That they're laughing about your private videos. But it says Tesla's privacy policy states that most data processing occurs locally within the vehicle, and personally identifiable camera recordings are not continuously collected. However, the company can still collect substantial data about you and your car usage. And the point going back to the Cybertruck blowing up front of Trump Tower, do you remember how that played out? I'll reference it in the next article. Elon Musk was able to unlock the car. He was able to get all the data. They were able to use the videos. Now, sure, you could argue that was an extreme circumstance. The only thing it showed you is that they can if they want to. That's all that matters. Privacy advocates have raised concerns about the potential for unauthorized surveillance through extensive video data collection, noting incidents where Tesla employees shared sensitive customer data between themselves. These are all linked to, I always include these, the link, look, all these articles are talking about it. Here's Wired. Your Tesla is watching. I mean, this is not a joke. This is very easily proven. They're just argue it's all for personal safety. How often has that been the case in your experience? But you know Elon's the good guy, right? So that's why it's okay. Do you know that? Or is that your opinion? Tesla's data collection practices have also been scrutinized in the context of the Las Vegas Cybertruck explosion, where the company shared detailed data with law enforcement. Okay, right there. It's like the Amazon Echo. Why would you want that? If you know that should they decide to, because national security or because law enforcement, they could just take your personal data they swear would never be used and give it to the law enforcement. That happens so many times with Amazon. Personal disputes amongst spouses and husbands. I mean, it's incredible. He showed you right there that should they want to, they can access it. Simple. Highlighting the ethical question of whether car companies are violating customers' privacy rights. In summary, while Tesla claims to protect user data, there are valid concerns about the extent of data collected and the potential for misuse, as evidenced by allegations from former employees and scrutiny over data sharing practices. Or, shot in the dark, maybe because he's being influenced by a very genocide-committing foreign government that has interest in attacking Americans. They're calling them out. And he's absolutely facilitating that right through his own platform. But let's not pretend like he will use other sources of data for the same thing. This one is Security Week. This is from January 6th of this year. Is your car spying on you? It says what it means that Tesla shared data in the Las Vegas explosion. Now, really, we already went over this. The point is simply that your car is spying on you, and that they very clearly admitted that when they ended up. The only point I wanted to add to this, that I'm glad I did this because it reminded me of this. Matthew Livelsberger, right, was the person. Do you remember that this person was what they claimed sent an email to Sean Ryan? Now, and we went on to point out that podcast where they were pointing to the emails and it turned out they faked the email. I mean, there's so much this overlaps. This is an ongoing operation. How we don't see that by now. The Sean Ryan podcast at this point should be very clearly seen as the CIA facilitation, as him being former and bringing on different people that sold you all these narratives right before this, the drone in the fog about sniffing for nuclear weapons. Yeah, where'd that go? Jones pulled the same card. Why do people keep listening to them? I don't know. It's spying on you, okay? And then again, and just like that, Republicans now support electric vehicles. Why? Because America, freedom and liberty, as they literally sell all those things away from you. It's right in front of us. Now, C-Centered News points out, right when Trump stepped in and said, I'm going to buy a Tesla. It's a great product, which was so incredibly weird and cringy that the president of the United States is to step out and basically hawk a Tesla at you. Why? Because at that exact moment, the price had completely tanked. Not hard to see the overlap here, guys. That's what they're doing. This person points out something else is very relevant. Here's Ted Cruz, January 24th. More than 100 Republicans sign on to oppose Biden de facto EV mandate. Electric vehicles are quote, not a practical option for most Americans. Colin Allard voted to support the Biden-Harris EPA mandate that would force 2/3 of all vehicles to be electric by 2032. This position is radically out of touch with Texans and, same thing. Now, yes, that doesn't say nobody should use them. The point, though, is that you can see, go back and look historically, a lot of pushback because that was usually what Republicans were doing. Here he is. Since the whole Tesla scam, this may be the coolest thing I've ever seen. Tesla. Why are we having politicians go get the thing? Alex Jones saying, this is America. I mean, shouldn't as any remotely honest conservative with brain cells to go, that feels weird. That doesn't feel right. I mean, Tesla isn't America, clearly, as this South African running a company that wasn't created by him from other people that weren't. I mean, clearly not America, but let's just pretend it's all American. The point is, this is strange. This is conflicts of interest, especially if there's other things going on. If this is some kind of, Department of Homeland, Department of Defense contractor project or something different. Its main point is hypocrisy. Poncho says, and the ones on the left who were all about electric vehicles are now attacking them. It's the other side of the point, which is hilariously stupid, right? How dumb is that? So now they've effectively, so that's why we always point out how dumb the Russian, I mean, I don't want to always insult them, how the partisan sides are played, which is the one that we're now going EVs, everything are now going after EVs, specifically Teslas, which were the primary one that was used. And now you got the ones fighting that now going, buy them. It's just hilariously stupid, isn't it? It goes, the far right is just as gullible as the brainwashed far left. Exactly, because they're the same thing. Woke right, woke left. Well, Night Watch Nate says, first Trump turned the White House into a Tesla commercial. Now Alex Jones turned into a Tesla car salesman, raffling off his own very Alex Jones edition Cybertruck. It's weird. I mean, let's be real, guys. Does not need your money. Elon Musk is not in danger of going bankrupt. The guy is, if we are to believe he's the richest man in the world, even when he lost $150 billion, he was still one of the richest people in the world. The guy is not stressed for money, okay? So it's insane to think that you need to somehow support Elon Musk. This is not about supporting Elon Musk. How do you not see that? It says all of these attacks on Tesla dealerships are a marketing campaign for Elon's failing company. And it could just be that. It could just be him not wanting to have his company fail. It's Occam's razor, right? But overall, I think there's more to it. Yeah, here he is. We already, I put that actually, let me grab that real quick. I think this is it. Yeah, this is the video right there where he just stands in front of his Tesla or his Cybertruck and just goes off about, there's little clips in it too, but the whole thing is him basically standing in front of the truck, just talking about how this is important. And that's what it says. Standing up for Musk and Tesla is standing up for America. He's done that more than once now. I just said, I don't understand why honest people fall for this. No, it's not standing up for America. Now, that's one point. Clearly, that does not make sense. Now, I argue more than that. It says it is standing up for an Israeli-purchased oligarch, in my opinion. I think it's obvious, but my opinion, who is rolling out the exact same Great Reset Alex was just pretending to fight. Now, even if you don't believe the Israel side of this, realize that that's exactly what they're doing. I'll play the clip again in a second. So if you are fighting those things, why is supporting the guy doing that supporting America? Well, that only makes sense if you're all on the same side. I'll include this for you. Now, here was the post of, just want to show you, here's the Donald Trump, like literally selling a Tesla in front of the White House. And Alex Jones says, breaking exclusive, which totally wasn't. Learn why Trump's domestic terrorist designation of Democrat gangs, even though nobody's proven that everyone involves a Democrat or that it's necessarily even a left-right paradigm thing. Personally, I think it's obvious that these dark funding aspects are usually bigger than just left and right. But it says attacking Tesla dealerships and owners is massive game changer. Silly. Well, here is the other one. This is from the 19th. If Tesla dies, America dies. Like it's just simply not true. That's stupid. Now you can argue Tesla we should support because Elon Musk is who I believe in, but they think you're that stupid. They're trying to emotionally manipulate you because of your love of this country to believe that Tesla is America, and if they fail, then America fails. That is worthy of ridicule. That's insanely stupid. Alex Jones also posted this. Trump pledges to end, now this is from November 13th, 2024. Trump pledges to end electric car subsidies and promote the U.S. auto industry back to the world dominant. Oh, I guess we pivoted. Now we're going back to EVs. I just want to show you the interesting hypocrisy of, or rather just the, go along, the, what do you call it? The fair weather reporter, as it is Alex Jones. Whatever they're saying thing, I support the current thing on the right. Here he is on April 17th saying Germany announces plan to ban private car ownership. Well, gee, Alex, where do you think the driverless car goes? Weren't you the one pointing that out, that driverless cars were going to lead to the Great Reset where you own nothing and you're happy? You were pointing that out. Funny how you're no longer saying that today as you're supporting electric vehicles, specifically driverless electric vehicles. Well, this one is from January 28th, 2024. It's already federal law. It says that all new cars have kill switches that track you every move. You mean like a Cybertruck, Alex? California is just throwing it in our face. Oh, because it's only the Democrats, right? We need to stop the technocratic prison planet takeover. Yeah, unless Elon says otherwise, and then you're all for it. And you call it something else, though. My point is just this is either he never meant this or he doesn't realize he's being played right now, which I find really hard to believe. He also says this. Elon Musk posted on the 24th, December 5th, Tesla, the self-driving aspect has gotten so good, I basically stopped driving, this guy says. I just don't know what to do with my hands now. That's where it's going. Elon Musk goes, yay, emoji. Alex Jones says, I like driving. I don't want a respirator to breathe either. I'm not against technological innovation, but I'm very concerned about what the globalist technocracy, what he's currently supporting, will do once these technologies are widespread and accepted. Yeah, that's exactly my point, bud. We need to develop and deploy technology that empowers and enhances our inherent human traits. Well, funny how funny what changes a year makes, right? Now we're all pro everything else because Elon said so. Well, I'll include Derek's outstanding article, Doge, is efficiency a gateway to technocracy? The answer is yes. It's very clearly where this is going, and he is rolling out the same old plan that even goes back to his grandfather. It's very clear. Technocracy Inc. And I'll play this again since it's relevant. I just simply said, Elon checks all the boxes.
Nobody will be safe if not everybody is vaccinated.
Are you vaccinated, if I
Yes.
may ask?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very pro-vaccination.
Yeah.
I believe the science is unequivocal.
Can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants. Just think of sensors planted into our brains.
Basically implanted in your skull. So, but it would be flush with your skull. So you basically take out a chunk of skull, put the Neuralink device in there. You'd put the electrode, you'd insert the electrode threads very carefully into the brain.
It doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you if you take a genetic editing.
It's a fusion of the physical, the digital, and the biological world. That's really the essence of the fourth industrial revolution.
A merger with biological intelligence and machine intelligence.
An effort for man to merge with machine in a healthy way.
Yes.
To beat machines, you basically have to merge with machines.
Most likely, yes.
As work is changing, is a universal basic income really a solution to this problem?
I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. And I think some kind of a universal basic income is going to be necessary.
Decarbonization of the economy.
Where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
I mean, my top recommendation, honestly, would be just to have a carbon tax.
This global reset is necessary.
Yeah, they clearly think that. Well, to reiterate, I just had to include this because, my God, this is insane. And as far as I can tell, this is not a parody. I'm not even going to play it all. I can't stomach it again. But I included it with this. And yes, I've showed it probably 4 times now. I really just think this is such a profoundly on-the-nose outline. I'm not going to read it all again. But this was what Free Prince posted about having blind faith in regard to Cat Turd saying, I have 100% full faith in Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. I'll just read the first part. He's saying there's no more dangerous sentence in the modern world than I have 100% full faith in insert name here. Not faith in an idea, not trust in principles, but faith. Blind, uncritical, unwavering in another human being, a stranger, a politician, a government official, an agent of the machine. This is the problem. The fundamental sickness. People do not want to think. They do not want to wrestle with complexity, with uncertainty, with contradiction. They want a figurehead, a banner to march behind, a team to pledge loyalty to. They want to delegate their own minds. Please read the rest of it. I've read it many times. It's very spot on. The reason I'm pointing it out today is this video. We thank you, Elon Musk, is what it's called. And I said this kind of political hero worship is one of the most dangerous and naive parts of this country's most radically partisan groups. They are quite literally together destroying this country while pointing at each other as the sole cause. And my point in saying all of this is because this kind of clip is what it looks like to have blind hero worship faith in somebody you don't know, who's somebody who is in a position of political power, and somebody who, even if they have the best of intentions, because of that position, should be held to more account than anybody. You should be more critical of them than anybody because you believe in them. But the opposite of what happens today. And it's because of hero worship like this.
He gave us cars that drive so fast, made rockets built to blast. Oh, thank you, Elon Musk. He took over Twitter's reign. He saved free speech for all, eliminating woke pain. SpaceX flies, Tesla self-drive, Starlink beams with laser dreams. He's got a master plan for our lives.
I think that's a good enough place to pause. He's got a master plan for our lives, guys. Just go back to sleep, trust the plan. It's all going to work out, right? My God. Of course, from the back of a Tesla Cybertruck, right? Because you gotta tap into that social contagion going around, right? I mean, if you want to throw up a little bit in your mouth, go ahead and watch the rest of it. It's insane. It goes on to be the same thing. And it's all just Elon's great, and he's the best, and he saved us from everything, and he knows everything. It's just insane. I mean, how in the world can you think? I mean, you know what? Let's just even say it's one of two things: blind hero worship, or somebody who is business savvy enough to know that she'll trick a lot of mindless people into going, yeah, and make a lot of money off it, which either way I think is disgusting, but I think that's crazy. And again, this is hero worship, and it is the worst problem in this country. On this person simply posts out the same thing and says it's a cult. A master plan for our lives? Why does that what anybody would even promote? Why do you want that? I mean, my God, because we have been turned into children. The partisan field, and far too many that fall in line with it are followers. They look for a hero, like Free Prince said, and their mind is hooked to that. You know, what's that phrase? The hook your wagon to that star, or whatever it is. You know, you are locked in. And people lose their logic, man. It's a terrifying thing. Now, you've seen this going around. I mean, I saw Tim Pool tweeting about his Cybertruck and how cool, and everyone's looking at me funny. It's like, these people are just so desperate to tap into the thing, whatever. It's just like the old NPC, the current thing. It's left and right, guys. Every time, all these things. But my point is, you're seeing all this crazy coverage of breaking news. And don't forget what we started with. That's what we're coming to next. Donald Trump is quite literally telling you these are domestic terrorists. Now, if they committed a crime, well, as always, we have laws for that. Already charge them with whatever crime you think they committed. To turn it into domestic terrorism is a political motivation. In fact, you could call that itself terrorism, because the action would be violence committed for political ends, right? So you could call that in the sense of one person just vandalizing a car. My point would be that you don't know their intentions. And then ultimately one person doing so would not raise to the level of terrorism because of one person's actions. But if a government is ultimately suppressing an entire group of people, or rather I should say, inappropriately, like basically turning them into terrorists when what they're doing is a crime. Let's be clear, first of all, I've already said it 6 times over. I am not in any way supporting all this dumb stuff that's happening. The takedown Tesla, that's laughably stupid. What is the point of that? Because you're petty and want to hate Elon Musk. What, you have Elon derangement syndrome. It's the same thing. Everybody should go, that's really dumb. You should not be just going after one person's company, which, by the way, employs a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that work there that have nothing to do with Elon's ridiculous sense. But that's my point, is that they create this. So they come out with this ridiculous Democrat thing, if that's what it really is at the core, and then they come out with the other side of it. And what that does, it traps your mind in this ridiculous back and forth, when the truth, the reality, everything else is right there in the middle somewhere. So right here, we have another video of somebody, vandalizing a car. That's like 90% of this. Yes, there's been extreme examples, like we showed out earlier. Circumcision in Mozambique, right? That sounds bombastic and stupid. 90% of it aren't as crazy, but also should be stopped, even though most of they're still continuing it. So that's my point. They use the 7 cars burned down in this factory. Yeah, that's crazy. And somebody should be charged with a federal crime for that. But the vast majority are a bunch of Karens scratching swastikas on a car because they're also trapped by the contagion of the partisan field on the other side. But it says cops are looking for an unhinged Karen after she was caught on a Tesla. scratching this. And you see all of them, from Jones to the rest, to Benny Johnson and Nick Sorter, every day. Breaking news investigation. Laura Loomer, we caught this person and we found this out. And here's a judge that supports it. It's just nonsense. There's relevance in plenty of ways. But the bigger picture with everything that's going on just in this country, and this is what you're focusing on. And then, of course, the real point. Using this to call them domestic terrorists is the bridge between the Venezuelan gang conversation, the Khalil conversation, and your government beginning to come after you, which is exactly what he says. And it should not be ignored. This is not a joke. And of course, you can go down the thread about all these different people. Like, guys, why would you care about this? Find her, charge her with a vandalism charge. That's all it is. You're scratching a car, you're keying a car. That's a misdemeanor, for crying out loud. And this is what you all care about? How do you not see that you are the one being played? Just a thought, and points out what he says, and we showed it in the last show. This is his tweet or whatever, truth on True Social. I look forward to watching the sick terrorist thugs, he says, get 20-year sentences for what they're doing to Elon Musk and Tesla. Okay, well, the one that burned 7 cars or threw Molotov cocktails into a Tesla factory, assuming that wasn't them to counteract their failing sales, yeah, definitely charge them with a crime if you can prove someone did that and that wasn't something else. But everybody else, because of that, because of the way they've got the momentum going, scratching a car get you 20 years. That's what he's saying. And then he goes on to say, perhaps they could serve in El Salvador prisons. See, just like Greenland and Panama, oh, they're trolling you. Oh, he's just trolling you until you're literally being sent to an El Salvadoran prison. Guys, this is not a joke. This is one of the most serious things that we've ever covered in regard to what Donald Trump has been saying. He is quite literally floating the idea of why sending Americans to a foreign prison for a charge there's already a crime for is what we might expect. Here it is again.
And if we don't have Elon, they could be up there a long time. Who else is going to get them?
I think that's the astronauts conversation. This is where it starts.
And I just want to thank him. He's going through a lot, what they're doing to him. And these people are going to be caught, and they're going to be caught. And
oh, my God forbid. I feel so bad what Elon's going through. The richest man in the world, with one of the most powerful positions in the world. He's really struggling because people don't like him, and they're burning his cars when he's a billionaire. I can't help but laugh. Now, it shouldn't, anything like that matters. I mean, that's a crime. They should be held accountable. Maybe he's suffering because of whatever, but it's inconsequential in the larger sense of things. And especially since this guy is a literal oligarch elitist. You know, it just sounds funny that they create this emotional draw. It's like you're watching a TV show and you suddenly care about your character. Oh my God, he's struggling. I can't wait for the next episode. That's what we're dealing with.
Going to be prosecuted. And from what they tell me, I see this just by watching your programs and reading the news, but from what they tell me, they could get 20 years in jail, and they'll get it. I'll tell you, there's going to be no leniency, and there'll be no pardons.
You know what? One note, by the way. He always does this. The same way he tries to act like he wasn't the one that signed that act and tries to cook it off to Rubio. It's because he senses that there's a building problem. What do you mean you only know it from their... So either you just admitted that you were being informed by corporate media of what your administration is doing, which is fucking terrifying. Oh, I just cussed. I'm so sorry. I rarely do that. I slipped on the show. For those new to the show, it is family friendly, so I apologize about that. I just this made me laugh because it's like, it's just crazy. But like pretending that you don't know what your administration's doing and you're reading on the Washington Post about it is ridiculous. But then otherwise, or I guess what the point is you trying to act like you're not in the know. You're not the one making the decision. I don't know. I'm just reading it like you are. Shows you that he's trying to distance himself from all of this. That's what I read it as. Sorry for the curse. Let's keep going.
By watching your programs and reading the news, but from what they tell me, they could get 20 years in jail, and they'll get it. I'll tell you, there's going to be no leniency, and there'll be no pardons. I can tell you that right now.
And you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they get, you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they'll go to one of these prisons in El Salvador. Do you think with the way that the judges have been issuing injunctions, it would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador?
Now, just note that he's not balking at all. He's not smiling. He's not acting like that was an offhanded comment, a joke. Straight deadpan. Point blank. Do you think that makes it easier or harder to send these domestic terrorists to El Salvador? Just so it's clear, these are American citizens, not Palestinian Americans, not Muslims. These are American citizens. And just because he wants to claim they're terrorists and to argue he can move them, I mean, that should be the most chilling thing we've ever discussed in this country. Literally watching what we've always been worried is coming. At the very least, floating the idea that, yeah, maybe that seems likely they are terrorists. My God, wake up, America.
Do you think with the way that the judges have been issuing injunctions, it would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador than these MS-13 or Tren de Arrival guys?
Well, I view these people as terrorists just like others. These are, when I looked at those showrooms burning and those cars, not one or two, like 7, 8, 10 burning, exploding all over the place. These are terrorists. You didn't have that on January 6th, I can tell you. You didn't have anything.
And see, that's obviously the point to go to, right? Democrats are worse, don't you see?
Like that on January 6th, which is sort of amazing because on January 6th, the Democrats were talking. Nobody was killed other than a very beautiful young woman, Ashley Babbitt.
I mean, it was Democrats are talking. I mean, he just rambles. Like, I don't know. He's half the time he's not coherent because I think he's just trying to kind of word his way around any kind of accountability. Don't take this as partisan support. They're all monsters and criminals.
Nobody was killed. And you look at what's going on now with these terrorists. These are terrorists, and that's an organized event. You know, take a look at their signs. Take a look.
See, these are subjective points. I already addressed the sign point. Yes, they're always funded. Every single group that has any momentum is going to get something from some group. Doesn't make it good or bad. And point is, it's always there. Same with the left, same with the right. That does not then make every single person you broadly point out as some kind of terrorist because you decide to make that the case. It makes the term terrorist meaningless, which is the point. Everything means nothing. Nothing means everything. You look to the power structure to guide you on what means what when they need it to mean something. Right? So you're a terrorist because I said so. Doesn't matter if you keyed a car. Those other people that have no connection to you who did this, even though we can't prove that part of it, they did the bad thing, so we made your thing a terrorist. Is anybody proven the Molotov cocktails, those 8 Teslas? Who did it? Who's been arrested? Who's in jail? They keep throwing out all these bombastic claims about some Democrat operation, which wouldn't surprise me. Have we proven these things? We're jumping past that to put people in jail who are Americans and floating the idea of sending them to a literal concentration camp. That's what this is. Look it up. They've got no outside areas. They have a small square of sunlight. They barely get any time anywhere outside of their cell, and they're put to hard labor. And if they're lucky enough to get some kind of a hearing, it's hundreds of people with one TV screen. And as I understand it, they basically are never leave. Their lawyers can't even get in touch with them right now. And let's not forget, we're talking about people we've already proven, I'll show you again in a second, are legally, or one specific example, who already had been given asylum, who was legally in the United States, and they sent him to El Salvador. And it turns out he's not even part of the gang. He got a tattoo when he was a kid in Dallas, according to his mom. Now, yes, she could be making it up, but guess what? You know how you find out? In due process, which he denied all of them, which even if they were illegal aliens, all of them would still have the right to due process, even according to Scalia, Reno versus Flora, many different Supreme Court rulings. All facts, all easily understood constitutional law, they don't care. And guess what? They don't care enough to go after American citizens.
They're all made by the same sign company. And they say,
yeah, did you prove that? See, what he's doing is pointing at what Insurrection Barbie said that day. How do you know they're all, you mean all these people used all the same sign company? Did you prove that? Seems like a big bill. No, what he's saying is they all had similar well-crafted signs. That was the argument. Not a single person, and prove me wrong, has gone out and said, look, here's the bill. They all went to this sign company. That's not what happened. They're making a broad, subjective, personal appointment where they say, look, they all have the same signs. And that becomes this man sitting at the Oval Office claiming he knows they all use the same sign company. It's laughable, guys. That's how this works. Whether that's Biden mumbling about 40 beheaded babies or Trump claiming this, these people are tools. I don't know why we can't see that by now.
expensive job. Now, these are the people that finance it are, in my opinion, in just as big a trouble as the people that are setting the match and setting the fires. So we'll see. It's under very serious investigation by the FBI and by the Justice Department. These people are terrorists.
Yeah, it's like the 7th time you said that. You know, without any legal classification. No, just we call it that, therefore it is. Well, that's classic U.S. policy. U.S. government policy. So this gets much more alarming as we overlap this with the other conversation. Here, we already talked about this, by the way. March 22nd, Trump could send Americans to El Salvador. Now here is the task. This is not a joke. This is the task force. So again, Pam Bondi and everybody else, all America first, right? We're going to go after what? Anti-Semitism. We're going to investigate October 7th. Now we have a task force to go after people that key swastikas into Tesla cars. Regardless of all of the people all like emotionally wrapped up in the left-right paradigm, I'd like to believe that the majority of this country looks at this, whether they're right-leaning or not, and go, come on. This is the last thing we need to go for. I mean, for sure, it's a crime, go after it. But to make this the focal point, this is about creating the justification to go after Americans for whatever they want to. How do you see that as America first? Pretty sure that's another country. FBI launches Tesla task force. Quote, this is domestic terrorism. How long have we been telling you that you were becoming the focus? You were always the focus, but they were turning this inward. They were going to make it their own documents over the last 15 years in intelligence. CIA, for example, or FBI, they've been writing that you, what is it called, like Battlefield America or something like that, where they were writing about, that's a game. I think there's whatever the title was, about how domestic terrorism was going to be the focus, or rather, people in this country. Well, Biden couldn't stop screaming out domestic terrorism. Now Trump is continuing the agenda, taking the baton in another flavor and continuing to focus on Americans for cars. Now, in regard to the Venezuelan aspect, let's not forget, Khalil, the deportations, all of this is interconnected, because realize they sent these people to the El Salvador prison, and now they're just kind of folding it over into maybe Americans too. Well, I'll include this again from Aaron here. This is the sworn affidavit, which you can it's linked to as well. That is about basically this is the one kid that we know for sure, but the other ones are up in the air too. Their parents, their lawyers are screaming all sorts of things, and there's no due process, so we're never going to find out apparently. But this is because this kid was legally in this country. He had gone through the process, was given asylum. So it doesn't matter whether you think that's justifiable or not. That had happened. He was here legally by every law we know, and they just didn't care. Like they don't care about your rights in this country, very clearly. I'll include that so you can look for yourself. But what's important about this, and we went over that in the last show in depth. Here's what he was asked, or what he said when talking about this in regard to this process. It says, Donald Trump claimed Friday that the law gave him the authority to deport undocumented migrants without having to explain himself to a judge. That's quite literally the opposite of the law in every context. But it says, on Friday morning, Trump continued his attack on the judiciary, posting to Truth Social, writing, quote, no district court judge or any judge can assume the duties of the president of the United States. Only crime. Okay. No one is doing that, Trump. That is his playing on the uneducated, manipulating emotionally. Okay, let's be clear. You want to argue that a judge is abusing their power to manipulate what you're trying to accomplish? That's a fair claim. To argue they're trying to assume the duties of the presidency is just a bombastic way to trick dumb people into thinking that they're breaking the law. The reality is the judges, whether radically motivated or not, which I, as always, argue probably all of them, what they did is completely within the law. They challenged through their ruling whether what they did was legal. Now, let's just say they're wrong. There's already a very clear process, by the way, which they're already going through. So this is clearly not about that, to push back on that and to say, no, they're wrong. Here's the law. The next, go to Supreme Court if you want to. That's how the check and balance system is supposed to work. To argue that them doing so, even if they are doing so through their own political views, is somehow a challenge to the law, is a complete misrepresentation of how the system works. It's as simple as that. So he goes on to say, at a late morning Oval Office press conference with Hegseth, a reporter asked, Mr. President, do you think you have the authority, the power to round up people and deport them? And then you're under no obligation to a court to show the evidence against them. It's a question. He says, quote, well, that's what the law says. And that's what our country needs. That's not true in any context. No matter what you think, what you're doing. Like, look, if they're illegal aliens, you don't need some abstract way to remove them. You could already arrest them and deport them right now. That's why you have to recognize they're using what you want to manipulate us. They're turning this against you. The point is, he does not have that. These people have the right to due process. As I've shown many times, and I think this will pop up right here again. I think it's this one. This is Reno versus Flores. That's Scalia, in fact. And he says the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process of law, in particular in deportation proceedings. There's plenty of other reports have shown you the Constitution protects all people. We just read an article where one of these other experts was telling you the same. To anybody, all person, with the Fifth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, it says any person who, it's the obvious reality. And I don't need to make this point for the 500th time. People who don't want this to be the case will always push back. It is the case. Khalil, especially as a green card, but everybody, even illegal aliens, but even more somebody who's been granted asylum, somebody with a green card, without question, guys, they have the right to due process in the First Amendment and everything else. So him saying that the law allows him to do that, I'm showing you this for two reasons. One, to show you how shockingly wrong that is, but two, because of what we're going to show you next. So just don't forget that Trump here is telling you that he did do that. We removed them without due process because that's what the law says. Okay, remember that. This is how they're always playing both sides of this argument. So first, which, whether this means something to you or not, I mean, it's Venezuela. So people that have a political side will choose to ignore it or not. That's how the partisan game works. People that are open-minded with or objective and nonpartisan, read it because it might be relevant to you. Venezuelan minister says no Tren de Aragua members among the U.S. deportees. I mean, frankly, I find that hard to believe. Venezuela might have an interest in trying to lie about it, but you can decide for yourself. The point is simply showing you that Venezuela is claiming they're not in that gang. Which, if that's the truth, and the point is we could prove that if they were given due process, you see how this works, then that would be a big deal. And maybe about something else entirely. But this is where it gets interesting. So Trump just said he did do that with no due process because that's what the law says. Jump forward a couple of days. Trump border czar, so Holman, says he won't defy the order on Venezuelan migrants amid the battle with the courts. So they're bowing to what the courts are doing, even though they were acting like that they're not allowed to do it, and they're okay, but now he's going, well, I won't challenge that. He says the Trump administration will not defy a judge's order blocking the use of war powers. That's the Wartime Aliens Act to deport alleged Venezuelan gang members, according to border czar Tom Homan. He told ABC News this week program that the Venezuelans recently deported to El Salvador had been given their due process. But then he adds, weirdly, cryptically, according to laws currently on the books. What? Okay, just to be clear, laws on the books is not the same as constitutional rights, right? These are amendments to the Constitution. So laws in the books, if undermine the Constitution, according to Mayberry versus Madison, 1803, null and void. So whether they secretly wrote some law that claims they can just ignore rights, doesn't change the reality that is the inalienable God-given rights to anybody in this country, anybody in the world, quite frankly, which is how that reads. But the idea here, according to current laws in the books, well, Trump just said he did deport them without due process because that's what the law said. So you guys seem to be making the same point, but you need to get your talking points in line. The idea being that the laws that we understand, the way that we interpret it, allow us to remove them the way we did without due process. He's simply trying to make it a little more opaque by saying we did give them that, but the way that the current law reads. So you didn't give them due process. You based it on some terrorism law that claims you have to put them in. I mean, it's all opaque. The reality, as we know, according to lawyers, according to Trump himself, is that they simply deported them without due process because they're terrorists. That's what we keep being told. Weirdly enough, Holman gives you a different answer. I think all of these people are uncomfortable about how one of them may be the one thrown under the bus because all of what they're doing, let's be clear, is illegal. It's not hard to see. You may agree with it, but it doesn't change the fact that it is illegal. So why are they reading it like that or saying it like that? Now, so the Trump administration says those deported were members of the gang, but relatives of the immigrants, advocates, and some of the men have said that they're not. Well, yeah, we'd be able to find out had they been given due process, right? That's the whole point right there. If he's right that they were given due process, then we would have access to the information. We would know what they were charged with. We would know what they presented as their evidence. The lawyers would know. So guys, we know that didn't happen because the lawyers of these people are like, we can't even contact them. So Holman is lying or really very cryptically trying to make it sound like they did. But when you read with the current laws, you know that's not what happened. Holman said he would not defy the judges with Boasberg's order, but reiterated the Trump administration would continue to crack down on what it deems to be threats. Well, what do you know? So apparently you can go after immigrants without this law. It's like we all told you in the first place, right? Because so if they can continue doing this through normal deportation routes, then you already know they didn't need to create some wartime act in emergency to So why did they do it then? And why did they rush it out secretly and do? Because this is a stepping stone. They didn't need something new to deport illegal aliens. They needed you to go along with something new that allowed them to go after you. It says, quote, we're going to continue to arrest public safety threats. See how broad it is now? And national security threats. We will keep targeting the worst of the worst. Well, they've already pivoted into that being Democrats. They've pivoted entirely into that being domestic terrorists who are Democrats. That should be very alarming, guys. Especially since, I mean, anybody, they call me a Democrat half the time, even though I think they're all ridiculous. So that's where we are. Funny how they're all saying radically motivated, impeach the judges. And he's like, no, that one's okay. We're not going to challenge that one. Like there's such a disconnect between what's real, what they're, even within the administration. I think they know that there's problems happening right now. Now, this is from The Independent, Trump White House. And this is what we wrote. This is the other part of the title. This is one, it's like, this is one of those I told you so moments. How long, just since this has been beginning, we've been telling you this is incremental. Trump White House, now it does say could, let federal agents search homes without warrants under the Alien Enemies Act. Okay. So Bowman says, okay, we're going to hold off on, mass deportations under the guise of the Aliens Act while this is processing. Again, showing you that they didn't need that to begin with. But since it's already there, maybe we can use it this way. Knock down another rule, law, right, in another direction. So now they've already established the mass deportation if they want to. Now they may go after your homes under the guise or the claim that maybe you're housing an illegal immigrant. Now it says lawyers for Donald Trump's administration are currently considering whether his invocation of the 18th century wartime law allows federal law enforcement to enter homes without a warrant. Guys, I mean, especially Republicans and conservatives, you know damn well that these things are sacred. These things are things that we have been speaking about and talking about, things that you have been defending. Don't allow them to use what you care about to shoehorn in exactly what we should be fighting. It doesn't matter the logic. For them to go into a home without a warrant should be, that's shall not be infringed, guys. That's what it means. Not except we made this point during COVID-19, right? It wasn't that this is the case until a pandemic comes along. No, guys, that's not how it works. The logic is the same no matter what the excuse is. You know that. Have the courage to call it out. Now it says, and again, it says without due process. The president deployed the Aliens Enemy Act to deport them without due process. The Tom Homan part of it, I think, is indicative of them trying to muddy the waters. It says officials, however, have admitted that many of the immigrants flown to these prisons have no criminal record. Now, of course, you could point out that some of them were illegal aliens, but regardless, they have rights they weren't given. But then on top of that, it's like, okay, so somebody comes to this country illegally, in many cases because they are running from stuff that the U.S. government is doing, but at the very least, maybe just because aren't you the ones that always told us they want a better life? Okay, fine. So the point is you then deport them to a concentration Guantanamo style camp because they're have no criminal record, but were illegally here. Like the hatred people have been grown to have for anybody like in that very category is disgusting. Now, yes, there are some potential criminals like there are all over the American citizens too. But the idea that you can just deport them away when they're not even from El Salvador, guys, it just opens up so many doors and they're abusing every one of them. It says terrorists don't get to hide behind closed doors. Oh, now we know they're all terrorists, right? Even though they've already proven that many of them are not, if not all of them. And he's calling Americans who key cars terrorists right now. So his argument is, well, if you're behind a closed door and we think you're there, you can't hide anymore. The administration is mulling whether federal agents can search a suspected gang members, search for suspected gang members inside people's homes without securing a warrant. Well, guys, they already have 17 different ways around that. Whether it's the swatting discussion, which by the way is weirdly coming around right now, even though a lot of it seems to be hype, There's clear examples of it, but some of them are people that just get a cop that comes to the door, and they call that swatting. But again, that should not be diminished. Swatting is a ridiculous thing that I think they allow. My point, though, is right now they could argue welfare check, right? Or any number of overlaps you've already seen where they just burst in your door without anything. No-knock warrants, for example, even if that's a warrant, but in examples where you're not told. There's so many variations of this. So this is just the extension of what has already been happening. Now coming from the very person who you argue is fighting for these things. That's usually how it goes. It's unclear whether the administration is providing law enforcement agencies with that guidance, which could amount to drastic breach of the Fourth Amendment. Could, and constitutional protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. Okay. Plenty of overlaps here. One, they don't know for sure, so they can suspect somebody's there and violate your rights. So right there, obviously, that's not how that works. Or let's say they know someone is there. It's still that's if you read it specifically, unreasonable search and seizure is only one part, but the idea being that this is something that, as always, all of them shall not be infringed. They don't get to say, but we think that someone's in there. They can come knock on your door and say, we know someone's in there. They don't need to come bursting in with a warrant. The bottom line is, or rather without a warrant is the idea here. They're creating an opaque rationale that they can use whenever they want to. And in no way is it in line with constitutional rights. The Fourth Amendment applies to everyone in the United States, it says, not just individuals with legal status, says Christopher Wellborn, president of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Quote, taking away that right would be an abuse of power that destroys our privacy, making Americans feel unsafe and vulnerable in the places where our children play and our loved ones sleep. Quote, thus far, it's been used to deport Venezuelan immigrants, but the administration believes it can be used to search Venezuelan immigrants' homes and arrest them even without a warrant. Now, the way they framed it seems to suggest that anyone they might suspect would house one, but you know how broad that can become. It is impossible to overstate how important it is for our judicial institutions, our Congress, he says, and for every American to stand against this. I agree. Down here it says, Bolsberg, and this is what I find interesting. Now, look, that's this judge you keep seeing everywhere. Elon Musk is paying people to try to impeach, which is insanely criminal, in my opinion, or at least, I mean, I think I just don't understand how anybody honest wouldn't call that out. You're paying people to vote, even if it's against impeachment. It's just clearly a compromised situation. My point is, I think all of these people are politically active. Clearly, Elon Musk and Trump are. There's no question there. But all sides of it, people they want to appoint would do so because they're on their side. It's how this game works. That's why our system is completely decrepit and broken, because all of them. My point, though, is that even though that's the case, you can read what's actually happening and recognize that what they're doing is more often than not, like whether you want to look back at old cases or things he said about previous discussions where he's clearly politically motivated, what's happening here, which I find very interesting, is rooted in what I think, arguably the bigger picture being what they're doing is wrong. So even if you argue some political point, he's right to push back on this. That's not siding with anybody. It's just the reality of what they're doing is a violation of your rights. But here's what it says. Bolsberg repeatedly questioned how officials are determining whether someone is a member of that gang. Seems pretty logical to me, without due process, because they're not being given due process. How in the world do you decide whether they are or not? Well, he had a tattoo. Yeah, well, so do a lot of people. And you could prove that in some of these kids that are not part of these gangs that simply got these tattoos. And again, in the case of the kid is not even the exact tattoo. It's just a rose-like tattoo, and they used that to deport him. Somebody, again, who was legally in this country. And it said, and that's why they declared them a terrorist organization, to try to give themselves some more legal groundwork. But it says, he's asking repeatedly how they're able to determine this without giving them due process. And what legal recourse exists if the administration deported someone to El Salvador or elsewhere under this act, Alien Enemies Act, if they're not a member of the gang. Well, that's kind of the whole point, right? The way they did this is created a situation where it's almost impossible to ever find out. That's the whole thing about, if you read about this prison structure before this, a guy who's also a tried and true, open Zionist, it's not my opinion. What's his name? Bukele, very much so aligned with Israel and very much so in line with the same kind of action, or even what they've done with the prison system. They removed all the judges. This is an authoritarian location. Everywhere their allies right now are leaning desperately into authoritarianism and calling it freedom. Just look at Prospera, which I'm going to cut. I know I keep saying it, but I will be having a show coming up about freedom cities and that whole overlap. technocracy. But over here, before all of this, there's been a lot of talk about these locations. And these are horrible places, rife with torture and rape and all sorts of things. And there's been reports long before this. That's where they're sending people just because they were here illegally with no criminal record. Think about ending up at a place like that, like Guantanamo Bay, that you never leave from because you were in, especially in some cases where you were fleeing some kind of atrocity that was being conducted by this government, especially in Venezuela. Now, it says the administration has admitted in the court filings that many, quote, many of the nearly 300 Venezuelans on those flights don't have a criminal record. And that's why you hear them speak in their broad generalities about how they're all very terrible gang members and terrorists. And that's absolutely not correct. In a sworn statement of the court, Immigration ICE, Robert Cerna, claimed that a lack of a criminal record, quote, this is what he said, actually highlights the risk they pose. And, quote, demonstrates that they are terrorists with regard to whom we lack a complete profile. So their allegation is the proof. Sort of like when Obama said, well, if we bomb somewhere, people that get killed are combatants because they're there, children or not. And that's a real thing. So they just called them, we killed 10 combatants. And just because they were there where we bombed, if they're there when we bombed, then they're combatants. Very Israeli of them. In this case, the idea that you can argue that the lack of criminal record shows they're a terrorist that we just don't know enough about is the idea that you accuse someone of a terrorist means they are, and if they don't have a record, it simply shows that we just need to investigate more. That's so wildly Orwellian. It's, again, so much of this really is terrifying. It is more than we've ever seen. And they're telling you point blank. Attorneys and family members have warned excuse me, the court that their clients and relatives, some of whom have their asylum hearings in the coming weeks and months, one of which already got it and was granted asylum. The point is there's many of them that were in the process and they took them too. That's also illegal. Have disappeared from the United States and cannot even be reached in the prisons. They're in this El Salvador prisons, if that's where they even are. Get ready, guys. Warrantless searches based on the guys that they think something. We used to be pretty strong, I mean, especially Republicans, that this shall not be infringed. I mean, how long until he makes the argument about guns or something else? You know, it clearly is in all the same direction. Now, just on an overlapping point, weirdly timed, Trump says any country buying Venezuelan oil, slap with 25% tariff. I mean, these are so over the top. So no country in the world is able to buy oil from Venezuela? How do you pretend you can even do that? That's economic terrorism, guys, because Venezuela is poking you in the eye. That's what's happening. Because Venezuela is speaking up and saying those aren't terrorists. And, you know, they push back and said, you can't just deport them back to Venezuela. So Trump's angry about that. And now because they went to El Salvador instead, he's made to look like what they're doing, which is authoritarian. So we're going to slap tariffs on you for no reason. It's just insane, guys. I mean, how does this not blow up in the face of America? This to me is being done for something else, not for American interests. Now, of course, Rubio says there is zero tolerance for terrorism or terrorist sympathizers in the United States. Of course, they're trying to make these statements in regard to what they're claiming are terrorists, while they literally support terrorism everywhere in the world, including in this country, because you can show very clear examples of all the overlaps, whether that is Israel, whatever their allies are. We can see examples of that overlap as they're carrying out all sorts of terrorist acts. And he says those who support designated terrorist groups, including Hamas, you mean like Israel, who funds Hamas? Ooh, whoops, that's not what he meant. Threaten our national security like they do every single day. The United States has zero tolerance for foreign visitors who support terrorists. Okay, well, there's an endless procession of Israelis who openly support what's going on in there. But see, it's not only about Israel, guys. The point is hypocrisy. You could show plenty of examples of people they support carrying out terrorism in Saudi Arabia, people they support carrying out terrorism in Syria, people they support carrying out terrorism in Sudan. Everywhere, guys. These people are the most shocking hypocrites that we can look at today. And literally what they're doing is saying people keying cars right now in this country, they're not allowed here anymore, while supporting the most accurate example of terrorism we've ever seen everywhere in the world. It really is an insult to our intelligence. And it's sick because these people are gross. They're bad people. And here is the same example. Phil Labonte says, Teddy Roosevelt was right. Well, he was also right when he said that it was servile and morally treasonable to the American public to blindly support the president. That was his quote. But it says, Roosevelt has ideas on immigrants. 1907, it says, in the first place, we should insist that if the immigrant who comes here is in good faith, becomes an American and assimilates himself to us, he shall be treated on an exact equality with everyone else, for it is an outrage to discriminate against any such man because of creed, birthplace, or origin. But this is predicated upon the person's becoming an American in every facet, an American, or becoming in every facet an American, and nothing but American. You see where this is going. There can be no divided allegiance here, he says. Any man who says he is an American, but something else also isn't an American at all. We have room for but one flag, the American flag. We have room for but one language here, and that is the English language, and we have room for but one sole loyalty, and that is the loyalty of the American people. Now, there's many points to make here. First is it gets kind of intermittent in between, but the one of the points he's making throughout it is that they have to assimilate, right? One language, one flag. Okay. Well, that's obviously changed in this country over a long period of time. And even then you could argue that, like, for example, in the UK, like a Winston Churchill, for example, despite being pointed back as some kind of a peace, this guy was a rabid racist with some of the most disgusting views. It's all public. People just don't like to talk about it. And you can make the same arguments about a lot of the people in this country, the leadership back then and after. That realistically, there was a lot of, feigned things that weren't really what they felt. Bottom line is the argument that you can't, just basically on the Constitution, have a different language or just come to this country and not want to assimilate at all. Completely, you're right. Anything else is not liberty. But that's not the same conversation because people have different opinions about that. That's why we fall back on the Constitution. See how that works? The other point he makes, though, as Elon Musk goes, yes, is obvious, right? So he's saying basically, you can't go after somebody and discriminate because of their creed, birthplace, or you're already failing in that case, Elon Musk, along with all of you. Everyone support you're all failing in that regard. But he says, but they have to make themselves American in every facet. Okay. What does he mean by that? American and nothing but an American. Okay, then what about the people out there professing to be Israeli as well? How about Brian Mass, who's also in the IDF? Doesn't that exactly meet this? Yes, it does. Now, you could maybe argue Elon Musk is pointing to that, but you know damn well he's not. He's trying to make this about Hamas supporters, about domestic terrorists keying Teslas. That's what he's talking about. Look at the rest of his timeline. It says there can be no divided allegiance here. Okay, same point. What about those that are publicly telling you that they have dual loyalty to Israel? It's not a racist point. It's not about only Jewish people. There's plenty of overlap to all sorts of places. This is about a government and its operations. So that's clearly also the point. But it goes, any man who says he's an American, but also something else is not an American. Okay. Now, I flatly disagree with the point that you can't be American if you believe you're something else. The only point to be made is if you're in any kind of a power position of any political influence, then you should not be allowed to have dual nationality, whether it's the UK, China, Russia, Israel, because that obviously presents a potential conflict. It's just basic logic. The only one in the world that applies is or doesn't apply to is Israel. And weird, what do you know? We've got a Zionist pact administration who's basically doing everything for one country right now. What a surprise. So my point is this is being done to try to deviate the conversation to look at these people while that they are the most obvious example of what he's pointing to. And Randall Rose says, better get all Israeli flags out of Congress then, right? Exactly. And what's funny is this person goes, yup, and points to the one person with a Palestinian flag, which, yeah, same point, by the way, just to be obviously logically accurate, consistent, which is what we do. That also applies. If we're the obvious point to be made. Now, whether she's doing that because they're all putting out Israeli flags is irrelevant. They are putting up a flag that represents another country. Now, we could all argue that maybe it shouldn't matter at all and let everybody do it. Same argument. I argue it shouldn't be allowed because all that does is create a potential conflict of interest. I think that's very obvious. So if we're going to apply it equally, we should. But you know damn well that's not what they're pointing to. So it's just silly. Marco Rubio going, nobody could be here and support these. It's obvious what they are. Now, this is building in the North American Union New World Order direction very rapidly. Trump has now ordered military plans to be drawn up to literally seize the Panama Canal. Now, the history around this aside and the U.S.'s obvious involvement, that's not where we currently stand, okay? The reality, whether China gets more involved or not, the idea that he thinks they can just step in and take what they want shows you everything you need to know about these people. They think the same thing about you and your home and your rights if they just decide to claim national security. It's no different than the Biden administration, guys. This is your government that we need to fight and stop. I don't mean violently. I mean literally take action through our political process if you think that's what matters. But whatever action you think needs to be taken to stop them from continuing to destroy this country. And again, hear me, I am not talking about violence. I do not believe that's the route forward. I think violence begets violence, but I do believe we need to stand and push back against what's happening. And same thing in Greenland. Here's what Vance just said.
Which controls Greenland, it's not doing its job and it's not being a good ally. So you have to ask yourself, how are we going to solve that problem, solve our own national security? If that means that we need to take more territorial interest in Greenland, that is what President Trump is going to do, because he doesn't care about what the Europeans scream at us. He cares about putting the interests of America's citizens first.
Oh, right, because it's in our interest to literally take someone else's territory. Hold on, let me play this again. I want to hear.
Which controls Greenland, it's not doing its job and it's not being a good ally.
Okay, doing its job? I mean, its job with its territory is whatever it wants it to be. That's for Greenland and their people to decide. The idea that the U.S. can say they're not doing their job, again, it shows you the way they view the world. And so too as all of our U.S. government, as far back as you want to look. Remember when Trump came out last administration the first time and said, we won't be the policemen of the world. He knew you wanted to hear that, guys. Then he went on to do the same things he's doing now. They see themselves as the people in control of everything. And so they're telling you they're not doing what they're supposed to. You have no ability to tell them what they're supposed to be doing with their territory.
So you have to ask your job and it's not being a good ally. So you have to
good ally being whatever the U.S. wants.
Ask yourself, how are we going to solve that problem, solve our own national security? If
it's national security now that we need to control this area. You know where this goes, about whether it's the resources, whether it's, there's a lot of overlaps. So whenever they claim national security, it means we take whatever we want from anybody with no justification because we need it. It's our, it's national security. Just ask the rest of the world. They very well aware of how this works.
That means that we need to take more territorial interest in Greenland.
By take more territorial interest, he means take more territory. Nothing new. Seizing Syria, seizing Lebanon, that's Israel, but the U.S. is right there with them. The U.S. is involved with this all over the world, marching around and taking territory everywhere you look. Here's what Arnaud Bertrand had to say. He said, this is actually pathetically sad. In order to justify the annexation of Greenland, hold on, is that same video? Yeah, just want to make sure that was the video. He says, in order to justify the annexation of Greenland, by the way, which half the party said we were all falling for, J.D. Vance now says Denmark is not a good ally, even though you couldn't possibly find a more committed ally, a more committed U.S. vassal state in the entire European Union. Here's why. They're a founding member of NATO. They participated in nearly every major U.S.-led military operation. Whenever the U.S. asked, even the most controversial ones like Iraq, Denmark was revealed to be the base for the NSA's spying on the European leaders. There's a link to Reuters right there. Denmark always buys American military equipment over European alternatives, usually which are worse and cost more. They've agreed to host a major U.S. military base in Greenland. What more could the U.S. possibly want to consider them a good ally? He says, apparently the answer is, let us annex 98% of your territory. That's all it is, guys. So you're bad now because you don't give us what we want. And as he writes, and this is the most important point, fantastic demonstration that nations that willingly become vassals aren't rewarded with gratitude or security. They're merely signal weakness that invites further aggression. That's the world of might makes right. That's who they are. In another point, Responsible Statecraft reports that Trump has now ordered slashes to red tape on foreign weapons sales. Right, because liberty, winning, some money for weapons sales to despots around the world. That's what this is. Trump is working on delivering what could be a big win for U.S. arms contractors. Is that what we all want? What one of the biggest scams of this whole thing is, by the way?
That is what President Trump...
Oops, sorry. As we kind of wrap here, a couple more points. When they were able to effectively convince a large portion of the base that when they made money, that you were winning was one of the best examples, was one of the most successful manipulations they've had. To argue that the 1% or whatever, the 0.01%, that military contractors, we made lots of money on this, or these big businesses made money because of our terror. When they convinced you that meant you were making money, that you were succeeding, well, even if the U.S. economy was better, that meant you were succeeding. When they convinced you of that, that was one of the best manipulations they've done. Because they got enough people to scream about, we're winning because Tesla, or because when that affects nothing but their bottom line. Look through history. The idea of trickle-down economics is it's a scam. It never works. They never end up trickling down to the average person because they enrich themselves, like we've seen over and over and over. So the point is here.
God,
it's killing me. Is that they are telling you that all of this, what they're doing is a representation of America getting better. No, it's a representation of the top of the pyramid continuing to consolidate power and wealth. Arms contractors, of which they're a part, is clearly. Political Pro reported that Thursday the White House is currently, quote, drafting an executive order, of course they are, aimed at streamlining the federal government's process of selling weapons overseas. Okay, here's a great example. To argue that you can write an executive order that removes regulations of you selling weapons to foreign countries and act like that applies somehow is insane. These are dictatorial decrees. They're just saying this is the reality. Why even write it down? Seeing as how it's meaningless if you can just return it back. It's a statement. It's a decree. It's illegal. There's plenty of the international law that they're already assigned to that would argue you can't just sell weapons to whoever you want, but they already do anyway. If you look at the reports year after year, the U.S. government continues to sell weapons to the most dangerous locations in the world, the ones that represent the most likely position to be sold to other despots, to be used to kill children, to be used. I mean, its report comes out every year, and the U.S. is at the top of that list. No one tries to explain that. Look at what they're doing in Israel, guys. This is who we talk about. This is who they are. And it's not unique to right. It's the U.S. government. And speaking of that, as we mentioned, we briefly pointed out earlier, here's Turkey continuing this direction. I haven't seen anybody really calling this out. They're a NATO ally. Turkey has now gone after, they've arrested politicians. Now they've arrested 1,100 journalists. Or rather, journalists among the 1,100 people they've arrested in this crackdown. Now, who knows? Maybe they're all part of some who knows? My point is that nobody seems to be batting an eye. Can you imagine if this was done in one of their adversarial countries where they arrest politicians and journalists? I mean, Israel's killing them and no one bats an eye. I guess they're taking their lead, right? So the point is all these different governments are pulling the mask off. They're going full authoritarian. Now you got Conor McGregor, another rapist, running for president in Ireland. You got Andrew Tate running for somewhere else. I mean, God help us if these people fully take power around the world. Now, Israel, to end a few points here, in regard to journalist overlap, since we just saw Turkey going after journalists. Well, in Israel, in Gaza, they're still killing them. Israel has deliberately killed another journalist, somebody who's been continuing to report on this from the very beginning, Mohammed Malsour, in an airstrike on his family's home in Khan Yunis. That's now 210 journalists or more that have been killed since October 7th. Can you even imagine? I mean, it's the same thing every time. It's hard to even be outraged anymore, even though absolutely am. It just be the express. It's. I don't even know what the right word is. For how long we've been pointing at this, how obvious it is, how the rest of the world clearly sees it. We need to see who the real bad guys are in all of this. That doesn't even mean that there has to be good guys. Understand? The point is that who we need to recognize are the very clear actor who is ignoring this, who is supporting this, who is funding this. Any one of them, whether it's UK, the United States, Israel, they're all villains. I don't know how else you frame that. Now, of course, the U.S. is now continuing to strike Yemen. Now, of course, it says targeting Yemen's Houthi rebels, killing at least one person. It's a hell of a lot more than that. And there's AP, like all the rest, pulling punches. The reality is, like Pete Hegseth said, we bombed the Houthi capital. Oh, you mean Sana'a? You mean the densely populated civilian location? Yes. Now, they call it the Houthi capital because they want to dehumanize what they're doing. We already showed you the horrifying video of children with arms blown off and faces covered in ash, bloodied up. That was in Yemen. And they proudly pointed out terrorists. Well, they're calling you terrorists too, guys. Here's what's actually going on. This is Pepe Escobar on the ground, as we showed you in the beginning. This is what they want you to think is their Houthi stronghold, a civilian residential location, like everywhere else they're bombing.
Sana'a, capital of Yemen.
Oh, and this is low, and it gets even lower when the camera turns away. I won't jump back in, so you can turn the volume up, and I'll wait when I'm done.
Sana'a, capital of Yemen. This is what CENTCOM does best. Bombing civilian buildings in a residential neighborhood in Sana'a, Yemen. This is what happened last time. They bomb at night because they are cowards. 5 people were dead, 15 injured, but these are initial numbers. Could be much, much worse. This is a residential neighborhood. It's about 2.5 kilometers from the center of the action in Sana'a. And once again, the President of the United States, who says that the Houthis and the Yemenis are barbarians and they're going to annihilate them, this is what they do at night because they're cowards. They bomb civilians.
It's the truth. As he said, what he said was they're going to annihilate them. That's what Trump promised, right? And then they go to bomb a very obvious residential location. Now, there's in many number of reasons that might be the case. Maybe because they chose to bomb civilians because that's what they do. Maybe it's because they were given bad data from Israel that is involved in this. Because Israel clearly wants to go after civilians. We shouldn't be even batting an eye at that. I just find it hard to believe they would be so blatant with it. But who knows? Maybe that's where they're going with this now. The bottom line is, whatever it is, they killed a bunch of civilians and they're trying to hide that. Or rather, just trying to act like they killed only terrorists like they do every time. Now, in regard to Iran, other points to include here, NSA Waltz demands Iran give up entire nuclear program, including civilian enrichment. Now, Trump is literally saying, we're going to go to war if you don't. Actually, you know what? I'm going to talk about this more in the next show because I want to give this more time. There's a point here we're going to get into. Oh, you know what? I didn't even include it. So that's actually good. I'm going to come back to this because I want to get into what Scott Ritter was saying. There's actually some really interesting overlaps here from Scott. I'm glad I didn't forget to include it. Yeah, okay. And it's interesting because he knows what he's talking about here. And he makes some interesting arguments about why it seems that Trump is leading us to like nuclear war. And people misunderstand him arguing that we should be doing that. That's not what he's saying. He's just showing you how likely it seems that with this direction that Trump is going to use what they call the tactical nuclear weapons. He points back to the Bush administration, to Trump and today, where they've been basically building what they call tactical nukes and act like that's not the same thing. And as even Putin pointed out, when those things are used from their perspective, they can't tell the difference. Now, maybe that's changed today. But what he said then was, well, then we would respond as if they fired a nuke. So it really makes no difference. And at the same time, it is still a huge increase. All they did was normalize the potential for nuclear warfare. It's insane. And Trump rapidly increased that. So my point here is that they're threatening, give up what every other country in the world is allowed to have, including nuclear weapons, by the way, which Iran is not seeking, according to everything we know from the State Department itself. Even the IAEA said they are not. That's not to say that they might not be doing it now. I don't know, but the evidence does not show that. And the point is that there's been different people floating that they may need to now because of what's happening. I mean, the point is you obviously see where this is going. With like a North Korea example where they did reach that and all of a sudden no one even talks about them anymore. It shows you there is deterrence there. But that Iran has been clear that is a violation of their beliefs. So maybe somebody comes into power that doesn't think that way, which, by the way, seems to be what they try to accomplish by putting other people in power they could then use to rationalize that. But by them threatening to get rid of what they claim is a nuclear program, but get rid of everything, it's a random violation. Every country in the world is legally allowed to have civilian programs, and everything they do proves they're not having a weapons program. And always making the claim is that's the case anyway, so remove it. That's what Israel's doing. Trump is literally opening his mouth and Israel's coming out. But all this is going to lead to is the potential conflict when they just don't go along with what Trump says. That seems to be a plan. We're going to go back to this more in the next show, more about Iran and where that's going. But just to end in general with Syria and Israel, Syria has not ended. I mean, it's just continuing to get worse and worse and worse. If you don't remember, they funded Al-Qaeda. Territorial Sham, al-Nusra. They funded terrorists the entire time. We've been telling you that for years. And the moment that they got us out of the way, those very terrorists became the people they backed. Because we told you they were backing them the whole time. It's not hard to see. They took him off the terrorist list. Jolani is in charge. He's the president now, right? Well, Israel, shocking, spends more troops to Syria. You know why? Because it was always Israel's agenda. 2/3 of Syria is what they have been designs for greater Israel. It's right on their map. The point is that, as always, the U.S. is fighting Israel's wars. So they fought in Syria this whole time. U.S. personnel lost their lives. And the moment they take control, Israel steps in, takes everything. Builds bases, deploys troops, has Golan Heights. No one says a word. Even Golani, even the Territorial Sham is like, we won't go against Israel. So how do you not see that the U.S. has been fighting Israel's war for Syria this whole time at your expense, and they just took it? Well, now they put more troops in. They build bases already, and they're launching airstrikes on multiple sites, which I believe, as Vanessa's talked about, that there are factions starting to try to push back. So they're bombing them anyway. Now here is the Jolani regime posting on TikTok, like everybody else seems to do, like the IDF post when they murder children, openly threatening to behead Christians and minorities. It's very easy to see this going on, guys. There's videos everywhere. Massacring Alawites, Christians, the very people that they said would usher in the age of freedom and democracy. They know that wasn't the case, guys. They fund the most radical elements in the world. Very provably. Because the people who are a little bit less crazy tend to not want to bow to their interests. So they fund the more crazy. And then they let them take over and they just take what they pick up from the ashes. Or rather, let them be destabilized so they can benefit however they want. These are very bad people we're talking about. They put these people in control because they're also bad people. Since the fall of Assad, as Syria Girl writes, girls are being kidnapped all over Syria, which happens every time, guys. Another Alawite woman has gone missing, part of a series of likely kidnappings a few hours on the Syria's coast. Now, lastly, if you haven't seen, Israel has now bombed yet another hospital, so all of them, but now again, this is the Nasir Medical Complex in Khan Yunis. This was, as of the 23rd, has continued into today. The reason it's important, Rami Abdul points out that the Israeli occupation has assassinated Hamas political bureau member, so a member of Hamas, by bombing the surgery room at Nasir Hospital. Now, this is a really interesting point, about just like we're dealing with in the constitutional rights aspect of Khalil and the Venezuelan gang. The reason it's a similar point is because even though this was a Hamas member, this is still a provable crime. This is a war crime, because as we understand it, regardless of whether you care about that or want it to be the case, it is the case that even if one of the people you're fighting is like he's getting medical treatment, then that is off limits. It's very simple. Now, whether or not you agree with it, that's the point. It is the reality. So they bombed an entire hospital, killing a lot of innocent people because they claimed he was there. But guess what? That's been their excuse the whole time. And the whole time it's been a crime. Very easily proven. You just got a lot of radical maniacs out there acting like they're fighting radical maniacs. And it says where he was receiving treatment for critical injuries sustained in a previous strike. Jeremy Scahill reporting this, saying this is them bombing. They're just showing you more evidence of what's happening in the hospital. Really just showing you that there's a whole bunch of innocent people wrapped up in all of it, which is always how this goes. And Jeremy just says this is horrifying. Nobody cares. On top of that, at the same time, this was as of the 24th, they have now blown up 3 more mosques. For no reason, just because they hate Palestinians. Israeli airstrikes completely destroyed 3 mosques, none of which were, as always, they can prove that this was it. They're just destroying infrastructure. They have been the entire time. Now, in case you weren't killed when they bombed the hospital, here's what happens to doctors that get taken, because they do. They take them as well because they want to get rid of people that have this profession. That's been pretty clear. They've even stated that in some cases. The lawyer of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia describes the harsh conditions and the torture, the beatings that he and other detainees face in Israeli prisons, including breaking his bones. And this is the guy from before, so they broke his hands on purpose so he could not continue to help people. Lastly, here's Haaretz, leading Israeli newspaper. Netanyahu has turned violently against the majority of the public. Sounds like we're dealing with. Even his own voters. making him a greater threat than Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis combined. That is an Israeli writing for Haaretz about what Netanyahu is doing to their country. But let's keep pretending like this is the best ally fighting terrorism for freedom, right? The truth has always been there, guys. The evidence has always been there. The question is whether you're willing to look, willing to be objective, willing to put aside partisan mania and just engage with what's factually, like, just engage with what's objectively clear. The reality here is that everything we're going over is so very important. Chilling information about rapid changes, or rather, again, it's always about lack of acknowledgement. Your inherent God-given rights are there whether or not they care to acknowledge them. That's the point. They don't dole out your rights. They never have. They were simply outlining what was inherent. That's why it applies to even illegal aliens. It's very simple. The problem is they have convinced enough people to think that this is something they control, and in doing so are able to remove. And it's chilling. We're watching this destroy this country. I mean, again, even from my perspective, like if I'm of the mind that the idea of statism and the government itself is the problem. But to just simply destroy it all with no plan, that's chaos, right? It's not what I'm asking for. The reality of what they're doing is driving you into a position of absolute chaos for their benefit at your expense, or rather for somebody else's expense. But even if you don't agree with that, you know you believe in the Constitution. Like the people, especially the people supporting Donald Trump, that's what this is built on. And so you have to stand up and defend that more than anything, because again, my point to what I was making there is that if we're forced to live in a state of society, this is the most obvious and, in my opinion, historically efficient at in some way giving you power to influence government, even if it's just through mob rule. Like the bottom line is they are trying to change the system, even the broken system that gives them all the power, to a point to where you have literally no influence over the outcome, that you have literally no say, no voice, no rights, no ability to do anything outside of what you're allowed to do within the context of what they tell you is your liberty. It's wild. And I know we see it. Have the courage to call it out. Thank you for tuning in today. I mean, even if you completely disagree with everything I'm saying, thank you for at least considering the information. Thank you for at least going through the source material and looking for yourself. That's all I ever ask. Just take the time to look into these things and consider for yourself what it looks like. In general, guys, as always, this platform is under immense attack every day in 1,000 different ways. As you guys might have noticed, we've had less written articles. Derek is still writing some, Robert here occasionally, but I've had to pull back on a lot because of all the lawyers' fees and all the different stuff that we're dealing with. I will be giving you guys some updates pretty soon. There was actually, I can't remember if I already told you or not, but I'm going to go through a lot more coming up soon. There was actually quite a positive development. Either way, even the outcome of that, we're looking at, I mean, like, remember we talked about the full thing was estimated to be something like 50 grand, like go to trial. Well, we've surpassed that just in the efforts of pushing back. But in one way, we had a very positive outcome, but I'll get into it in an upcoming show. The point, though, is that it's just, I think that's what it's all about. Trying to drain your resources, trying to get you distracted in other things because you're having an effect. What we're doing is changing minds, and that scares them more than anything. So thank you for continuing to support that. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Pop culture has touted Elon Musk as some sort of eccentric heavyweight genius with humble beginnings. But this is demonstrably false. Elon Musk was born in South Africa, where he claims he grew up extremely poor, but his family owned an emerald mine. As a teenager, Elon would trade emeralds for cash in New York City, and his father bragged how they had so much money we couldn't even close our safe. Musk claims to have had about $100,000 of student loan debt, but he received a full scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania, where he bought a 10-bedroom frat house with his friend Adeo Resi and ran an illegal nightclub. The pop culture claim is that Elon has an IQ of 155, but this has never been tested, and after being accepted into Stanford for PhD studies, he dropped out after 2 days. After dropping out, Elon began his first business venture with his brother Kimball, Zip2, which was essentially a digital version of the Yellow Pages. The brothers received tens of thousands of dollars from their parents, and yet Elon denies this. An associate of Elon's father, Greg Curry, got involved to bring in investors, but Elon's code was no good, so they had to hire on professional coders to rewrite everything. Zip2 was then sold for $307 million to Compaq, who later shut it down without ever earning a profit. Elon made $22 million, bought a $1 million McLaren F1 supercar, which made mainstream news, before he totaled the uninsured vehicle. Musk then went on to create an online bank, X.com. He partnered with banking expert Harris Fricker, Edward Ho, and Christopher Payne. All three ended up leaving the company after accusing Elon of lying to the media about the quality of their product. Elon claims he founded PayPal. Before the company was named PayPal, it was known as Confinity. It was founded in 1998 by Peter Thiel and Max Levchin. After losing millions of dollars, Elon's X.com was bought by Confinity in a merger in 2000. All Musk contributed at Confinity was his own power struggle. He made himself CEO and pushed to change the name to X.com. The executive team successfully petitioned to fire Musk while he was away on vacation. Part of Musk's resignation agreement stipulated that all references to founders of the company will be removed from their website, allowing Elon to claim credit, which so far is all he has ever achieved. Peter Thiel then rebranded the company as PayPal, went public, and sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. Elon made $180 million from the deal, which he then invested into Tesla, SpaceX, and failed company SolarCity. Elon falsely claims to be the founder of Tesla. Tesla was founded in 2003 by Mark Tarpenning and Martin Eberhard, who developed the Tesla Roadster. When Tesla Motors began looking for venture capital, they approached Elon Musk, who had the fake credibility as PayPal's co-founder. Musk joined with the condition that he be named chairman of the board. In emails, Musk was upset that the media was not giving him credit for Tesla Motors and went after Martin Eberhard, replacing him as CEO. He then forced Eberhard out of the company and rewrote the company's history to have himself listed as an original co-founder. Martin Eberhard, the man behind the Tesla Roadster, was promised the first Roadster off the assembly line, but Musk screwed him over on that as well and sent that car into space.
You can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly.
So who is Elon Musk? Elon describes his father as being an evil, abusive man. His father, Errol Musk, has been accused of being a pedophile and fathered a child with his stepdaughter, who is 42 years younger than him. This spoiled, narcissistic failure, son of accused pedophile, wants to put computer chips in everyone's brain so that we can merge with artificial intelligence. His girlfriend is now bragging how this could all lead to a communist utopia. And strangely enough, former Nazi and head of NASA, Wernher von Braun, predicted a man named Elon would conquer Mars in a 1952 novel that he wrote. Which is odd, because NASA has partnered with Elon's SpaceX to work towards colonizing Mars. Elon Musk, like everything else in today's modern society, is a fraud, a fake genius, just like fake philanthropist Bill Gates and his fake vaccines. Brought to you by the fake news. Here's a pro tip for dealing with the mainstream media and all of pop culture. Assume it's a lie and research everything.
You can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly.